That's better. Morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Development Standards Committee, the first one of 2024, and welcome to members of the public who have joined us for the meeting today. A reminder that this meeting is being recorded, but is also being broadcast live on the Angus Council YouTube channel. So can I remind all those joining us remotely to turn their microphones to mute, please, unless they wish to speak, and they should do so by raising their hands remotely. Apologies for absence, Sarah, please.
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Melville.
Thank you. And I note we have 4 elected members coming in remotely today. Agenda item 2 is on declarations of interest or statements of transparency. Have any members either present or remote? Councillor Gall.
Thank you, Convener. Due to knowing the applicant for agenda item 6, I will remove myself from the meeting.
Any other in the room? In that case, I will declare an interest in agenda item 8 for 1A High Street, Carnoustie, report 38 of week 24, being local to the site. I know a considerable number of those objecting to this planning application, either by way of petition or by individual objection. As such, I will vacate the chair to the Deputy Convener at the appropriate point in the proceedings and not take part in the debate and leave the chamber. Agenda item 3, building warrants. Committee is asked to note that during the period 2nd December 2023 to the 2nd of February 2024, a total of 84 building warrants, 4 demolition warrants and 28 amendments to warrants have been approved, with an estimated cost of £25,295,080. A copy of the approved warrants has been sent to every member. Is that noted? Noted. Thank you. Agenda item 4 on delegated decisions. The committee is asked again to note that for the same period, a total of 90 applications have been approved and 3 refused under the Planning Acts through the scheme of delegation to officers. Again, a copy of these have been sent to every member. Again, is that noted? Noted. Thank you. Right, agenda item 5 is the minute of our previous meeting. That minute's submitted for approval as a correct record, meeting held for this committee on the 12th of December 2023. Can I ask member if there's any comments or adjustments for these minutes? If not, are the minutes approved? Thank you. Right, we have a busy morning ahead with a number of planning applications and other items on the agenda. We'll start off, if Councillor Gall, you want to leave now or go offline. Agenda item 6 relates to report 3624 for planning application submitted by Craig Nathrow Eggs Limited for the erection of 2 32,000 capacity free range hen sheds, feed silos, egg packaging facilities, access, drainage, landscaping and associated works on land west of East Sameathi Farm at Lure near Forfar. Mr. Taylor, do you want to start to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm trying to make this full screen. Great. Okay, so the first item is a major planning application. It is for a development comprising the erection of 2 32,000 capacity free-range hen sheds, feed silos, egg packaging facility and associated works on land to the west of East Sameathi Farm Complex by Lure Forfar. So the approximate location of the sheds which are proposed in the application is shown by the red circle, which is shown just to the bottom half centre of the slide. The sheds will be located to the west of the East Sameathi Farm Complex at the end of an existing access track. The site in general is located approximately 4 kilometres to the south of Forfar Town Centre, around 2.8 kilometres south of the Balmashana Monument. Members may note the position of the linear feature to the left-hand side. That is the trunk road, the A90 trunk road, and that's located approximately 1.2 kilometres to the west of the application site. Other features in the landscape which are worth drawing attention to at this stage are the location of Fotheringham Hill, which sits to the south. That's rising land to the south of the application site. And the closest public road to the site is the Moss Side C55 public road, which runs from Loughlin's Caravan Park in the northwest in an easterly direction towards Cotton of Lowney, where it joins the Forfar to Canusty public road. So in terms of the development plan position, planning policy, both through MPF4 and in the Angus Local Development Plan, is supportive, offers support to proposals which involve rural economic activity, which includes proposals for local food production, where impacts associated with the development can be appropriately mitigated. Planning policy also seeks to avoid development on prime quality agricultural land. However, there are a number of circumstances where development on prime quality land can be permitted, including where the development is linked to an existing farm or rural business. And in this case, the sheds will be located on land which is category 2 and 3 at the end of the access track shown in the position here. So information submitted with the application from the applicant has indicated that there is a shortage of egg supply in the domestic market, and the applicant wishes to expand their existing egg production operation. They have an existing 32,000 hen shed located to the north, 2 kilometres to the north of the site, in the approximate position of the blue circle. That's Craignathrow Farm, and there's an image at the bottom right-hand side of the slide which shows the applicant's existing egg production operation. Members may recall a committee in August last year considered an application for a solar farm which was located either side of the Craignathrow Farm building complex, and again that's around about 2 kilometres to the north of the application site. So this is an application which has been subject to consideration under the Environmental Impact Assessment regulations. The application is supported by an Environmental Impact Assessment report. The application has been subject to a number of third-party representations, 206 objections, 212 representations in total. Those representations include work that has been carried out by consultants acting on behalf of third parties, which has provided critique of the environmental information that's been submitted, and that information has also been examined by third parties, by consultation bodies. Where necessary and where appropriate, additional information has been submitted in support of the planning application, and revised assessments have been submitted to address the main environmental issues as identified in those objections and identified by consultation bodies. But the information we have available to us identifies the main environmental impacts associated with the development to allow an understanding of what those main impacts would be and associated mitigation proposals. So just talk a little bit about what's within the development, what's part of the development. So we have the application site identified by the red line, and that goes around what would be the range area proposed for development. You have a low-lying area lying to the north of the site, and then rising land to the south of the site. And both the areas to the north and south would form part of the range area for birds accommodated in the hen sheds. The sheds themselves will be created on a platform which sits where the land starts to rise at the south. They would cover an area of around about 1.5 hectares in area. In addition to that area, there would also be works further to the west to form a compensatory flood storage area. That would cover an area of around about 1 hectares to the west of the sheds, and I'll give a bit more detail on that for members in subsequent slides. It's worth pointing out at this stage as well that the Spittal Burn runs along the northern site boundary, as illustrated by my cursor, and areas within the range area to the north of the sheds falls within the floodplain of the Spittal Burn. Other features that's worthy of pointing out is the access to the site would come down from Moss Side Road. This is the existing farm track to East Amethi. There would be an upgrade to the existing track which runs from East Amethi in a westerly direction towards the position of the proposed sheds. The linear feature shown in the top left-hand corner of this slide is the overhead transmission line, electricity transmission line, and to the southwest of the site there are 2 wind turbines associated with Western Meathie, which are 46 to 47 metres in height, and they're just located to the southwest of the site, and members may have seen those in views when travelling down the trunk road. In terms of the detail of the buildings proposed, 2 hen sheds will be formed, 110 metres in length, 24 metres in width and 7 metres high, rectilinear features containing vents in the side, walls and gables containing fresh air chimney vents in the roof. The proposal would incorporate feed silos located at the westerly extent of the 2 sheds, 2 to the south of the sheds and 2 to the north of the sheds. Between the 2 sheds at the eastern end, there will be a packing house measuring 20 metres by 20 metres. Again, that would be 7 metres high. The proposal incorporates a proposal for solar panels on the roofs of the buildings, which would provide a source of renewable energy to help power the proposed development. Information available suggests that the buildings will be finished in a recessive shade in an attempt to mitigate some of the landscape and visual impacts associated with the proposed development. So, intensive livestock installations are the type of development which can result in significant amenity impacts on those that live in the surrounding area. And those impacts can relate to noise, they can relate to odour, air quality or traffic movements. And the slide I have on the screen just now shows residential receptors within 1 kilometre of the site. That incorporates 3 properties at the Eastern Meathie Farm complex. So the applicant's farmhouse, which is located at the bottom of, or where my cursor shows to the bottom of that grouping, that's located around about 348 metres from the proposed sheds. And there are 2 unconnected private residences located further to the north. We have Eastern Meathie Bungalow, located around about 340 metres to the east, and we have the White Cottage, which is located approximately 400 metres to the east of the proposed sheds. The other closest residential receptors are located at Western Meathie, 800 and 900 metres from the proposed sheds, respectively. So, available information guidance suggests that this type of installation, intensive livestock installation, should ideally be sited 400 metres from housing to minimise impacts on odour. But that is a guidance document, it's not an absolute rule, and when information demonstrates impacts can be appropriately mitigated, that distance can be reduced, as has been the case with other installations of this nature elsewhere in Angus. Again, the applicant has provided fairly detailed noise, odour, air quality and manure management information. That information has been modified and revised as a consequence of feedback from consultees and having reviewed the consultant reports which have been commissioned by third parties. So the information has been revised to address the most significant issues in that information in objections and identified by consultees. Consultees are satisfied, both SEPA and environmental health colleagues are satisfied that the revised information illustrates the impacts associated with noise, associated with odour, air quality and traffic movements can be appropriately mitigated, and planning conditions are proposed that deal with those matters, including a requirement for a noise management plan, an odour management plan, introducing noise limits on the development and controlling the timing of HGV movements. Developments for intensive livestock installations of this scale are also subject to the pollution prevention and control permitting process, which is administered by SEPA. And that process introduces an additional degree of safeguard for amenity in that it governs environmental impacts associated with the development in respect of a number of different things, which includes noise, odour and dust. In this case, the application site has been granted a PPC permit for an intensive livestock installation in this location, and that permit is subject to conditions which ensure that no odour from development cannot be offensive where the site boundary reaches its point closest to residential property. So there are controls to the PPC permit which control odour, control noise and dust, and there are controls proposed through the planning report before members at section 10 which also include mitigation measures to control issues associated with noise, odour and other amenity impacts. Another matter which is addressed in some detail in the applicant's environmental impact assessment report are effects in terms of landscape and visual impacts. And you'll see in the papers that's also a matter which is subject to comment from members of the public. The applicant has provided an analysis of landscape and visual impacts associated with the development, and I'll just show you a few slides now to try and give you an impression of the significance of that impact. So this slide is a ZTV, or a zone of theoretical visibility, and the shaded area shows us that within a 2 kilometre area how visible the development is likely to be from locations within that 2 kilometre zone. So what that does show is areas to the south of the site, there will be limited visibility of the development, largely as a consequence of rising land at Fotheringham Hill. But the development would be visible from sections of the A90 trunk road south of Loughlands as it travels south, as the level change drops to the south. It will be visible and obvious from rural roads in the surrounding area to the north. This is Moss Side Road. This is the public road which extends north towards Craignathrow, and there are a number of residential properties in that location to the northwest, to the north and to the northeast, where the development will be an obvious feature in views as a consequence of rising land to the north and a fairly open valley bottom looking south. So I have 3 viewpoints to show back and show the locations of those viewpoints. Firstly, we have a viewpoint which is from Moss Side Road, so the public road which runs east-west to the north of the site, around about 1 kilometre north. We have a viewpoint which is reflective of the main views of the development from the closest residential receptors at East Amethi, that's viewpoint 2. And we have a third and final viewpoint which is reflective of views from the elevated land to the south on Fotheringham Hill, looking in a sort of north-northwesterly direction. So viewpoint 1, this is taken from Moss Side Road, around about 1.1 kilometres to the north of the site. So as I suggested earlier, it is a fairly open valley in fairly localised distances to the development, so there will be open views across the low-lying land towards the proposed development. On the left-hand side of the image, we can see the buildings associated with the existing East Amethi Farm building complex, and the buildings proposed in the application were built at a very similar elevation in the area to the east. Now, it's considered that having regard to the landscape backclothing provided by rising landform to the south, landscape and visual impacts from this location would not be unacceptable, subject to mitigation including new planting and the buildings being finished in a recessive shade. The buildings would be an obvious feature in views, but it's not particularly unusual to see agricultural buildings of this nature throughout rural Angus. The wire line below shows the image of the building superimposed onto the topography, and the next slide shows a photo montage of that part of the development. Members will note on the east side of the development there would be a platform raised on which the buildings would be located. The compensatory flood storage area we formed by just reducing land levels to the west of the sheds in this area. That isn't included in the photo montages, but that area would continue to be landscaped. And while there would be some change in levels to reduce land levels in that location, that's not considered in itself to be a significant landscape or visual impact. Moving to impacts from the closest residential receptors. So this photograph is taken from the east, looking west towards the development site. So the site would sit at the end of the access track shown in the photograph. In this view, you'll see that the building would be seen against rising land, which will provide a form of backclothing to the structure. In the background, you can see buildings associated with West Amethi, 800 metres further to the west. You can see the position of the overhead transmission line. So this is a fairly man-modified landscape at present, and it's not particularly unusual to see this type of development and this type of view elsewhere in rural Angus. The wire line at the bottom again shows that from this location, the main views of the development would be the eastern gable ends of the structures and the associated feed silos. You would also see the level platform as land levels are raised to create a level area for the buildings to be formed in that area. Again, just a photo montage showing the visual impact of the buildings from views from that location. Planning conditions are proposed, proposing new landscaping, including 2.6 hectares of new tree planting, and tree planting would also be a requirement along the the south side of the proposed access track, which in time, as it matures, should also help to mitigate the most significant impacts in those views. And finally, the final photo montage from the south of the site. So this is looking down the slope. We have the sloping area to the south of the proposed sheds. That will be the southerlymost range area, and then the lower lying area to the north of the proposed sheds, and that will be the northerly range area serving the sheds. But the buildings will be formed in the area where the flatter land meets the rising land in this approximate position, as illustrated by the wireframe image below. Again, from this location, views of the building would be seen against a landscape backcloth. Recessive colours would be used on the structures to help to mitigate the most significant landscape and visual impacts associated with development. So just revisiting landscape and visual impacts, there are criticisms again in the supporting objections to the proposal, including the assessments provided by consultants acting on behalf of third parties. And it acknowledges that the images that I've shown do not show the works associated with the flood storage area, which will be formed by reducing land levels in a 1 hectare area to the west of the site. However, that would be a naturalised area. It would continue to read as finished and planted up material, so landscape and visual impacts associated with that are not significant, and officers are satisfied that the information in the environmental impact assessment report allows an understanding of the most significant landscape and visual impacts. Officers are satisfied those impacts would not be unacceptable, subject to conditions requiring recessive finishes in the buildings and requiring new tree planting, noting that for most locations the buildings will be seen against rising landform in views. Moving on to matters related to flooding and drainage, and the image shown here is an extract from third-party objections to the proposal. And what it shows is that parts of the Northern Range area are subject to flood risk. They fall within the floodplain of the Spittal Burn. They currently flood, and they would continue to flood periodically and in heavy rain events, as is the case, as I say, at present. So the buildings would be formed on a raised platform in an area between the two pylons we see here. So in this approximate position, in this location, the buildings would be formed above the functional floodplain level, and while the range area to the north of the chicken sheds would not be accessible during those extreme weather events, there would continue to be range areas to the south of the site which are out with the flood risk area. SEPA has been subject to extensive dialogue between the applicant and SEPA looking at matters relating to flood risk. SEPA has also been provided with copies of the representations, the photographs of flooding in the range area, and they are satisfied that flooding is not an issue which is significant and cannot be mitigated. They note that the buildings would be elevated above the floodplain. There will be a range area to the south of the floodplain which will be available to the development in areas in times of extreme weather. They note the area to the north of the site would periodically flood, but they do not consider that to be an unacceptable issue. So just talk a little bit about the compensatory flood storage element of the proposal. So the building platform on which the chicken sheds will be located involves land raising within a small part of the functional floodplain, which affects part of the building platform serving the northerlymost shed. The consequence of building in the functional floodplain is the development would potentially displace floodwaters. But in order to address that matter, the applicant proposes compensatory flood storage in the area to the immediate west of the development, and that will be formed by reducing land levels in that location. So we have a section at the top of the slide which shows a green line with existing ground levels in that area. That is a fairly steeply sloping area. Those land levels will be reduced below the level of the floodplain, which is 99.5, as illustrated by the blue dotted line. The levels will be reduced to 98 metres in that location to offset the displacement of water generated by building land levels, raising land levels in the functional floodplain. SEPA spent a significant period of time looking at flood risk matters, working with the applicant to address those matters. SEPA is now satisfied in the basis of flooding grounds that the proposal would not result in unacceptable impacts, and the development would not increase the risk of flood risk to property land out with the application site. Other matters relating to flood risk are found in representations, are also addressed in some detail in the report. Matters relating to surface water. The proposal incorporates a surface water sustainable drainage system which will be located to the east of the development. It would incorporate surface water management methods which would intercept water which comes down the slopes of Fotheringham Hill from the south. It would intercept that water, it would take it to the east of the sheds, the water would be stored and gradually released into a field drain which runs along the east side of the sheds in this approximate location. The advice officers have received from both SEPA and the road service is that impacts relating to flooding and drainage can be mitigated. This is an application which has been under consideration for a period in excess of 2 years. There's been a lot of work to look at and address matters relating to flood risk, and the advice officers have received from consultees is that those matters can be suitably addressed, subject to appropriately worded planning conditions. Other matters related to impact on the natural environment have been considered in the supported information, and the report covers those matters. The air quality assessment suggests that impacts on nature conservation sites would not be significant as a result of development, and it's worth noting that there is potentially significant biodiversity enhancement through the formation of 2.6 hectares of new tree planting, native tree planting in the range areas and along field boundaries surrounding the site. So the final topic I just want to say something about is traffic. Again, that is a matter which is raised in representations, and the slide that we see shows the route for construction traffic. So on the left-hand side of the slide, we see the position of the trunk road. This is the Forfar South junction. So traffic, construction traffic would access the development from this location. It would connect to the A road, which connects to Forfar South, before turning off by Loughlin's Caravan Park, where it would join Moss Side Road. The road service has requested some improvement to the existing informal passing places which are sited on Moss Side Road to offset impacts associated with construction and operational traffic associated with the development, and the formalisation of those passing places would also be a wider benefit to other users of the public road network in that location. The construction period is anticipated to last between 16 and 24 weeks. During that period, HEV movements would be relatively constrained, a 2-week period for the construction of parts for the construction of the sheds, and limited movements associated with concrete, lorries, that type of thing, but otherwise no significant vehicle movements associated during the construction period. During the operation of the hen shed, again, very limited vehicle movements, weekly vehicle movements associated with feed delivery, associated with egg collection, a tractor and trailer twice per week to remove manure from the site, and more domestic scale traffic associated with staff who would be working within the premises. So mitigation measures are proposed to deal with traffic impacts, operational and construction traffic impacts through the formation of passing places and requiring a construction traffic management plan, and neither road service nor our colleagues at Transport Scotland have raised any objection to the proposal on the basis of traffic impacts. The report deals with other environmental impacts associated with the development, and just in passing, it's considered that there are no unacceptable impacts on cultural heritage or other matters relating to infrastructure. Now, members have the papers before them. There are many objections to the application, and amongst other things, they raise discrepancies between the development as proposed in the planning application and the development as granted a PPC permit by SEPA. The detail of those two developments differs slightly, particularly in respect of drainage. That matter has been raised with the applicant, it's been discussed with SEPA, and the applicant has indicated their intention to modify the PPC permit that they have submitted to ensure that the drainage arrangements associated with the PPC permit are consistent with those shown in the planning submission, and SEPA would be consulted as part of any condition discharge associated with the management of surface and foul water from the development. So finally speaking, final slide, just to bring matters together. This is an application which has attracted a significant level of public interest and has been under consideration for a significant period of time, while officers work with the applicant to try and mitigate environmental impacts associated with the development. There are a significant number of objections to this application, including objections submitted by consultants acting on behalf of third parties. That information has been considered by officers, by relevant consultees, and updated environmental information has been provided where necessary to address the most significant impacts. But the Environmental Impact Assessment Report, as amended, along with the consultation responses from technical consultees, allows us to understand the most significant environmental impacts associated with the development, Technical consultees have had regard to that information and have no objection on the basis of environmental impacts associated with this development, and they are satisfied that the most significant impacts associated with this development can be appropriately mitigated. Section 10 of the report identifies a number of detailed planning conditions which are proposed to ensure suitable mitigation could be secured, and those conditions relate to a number of matters, including noise, odour and addressing flood risk matters. SEPA is the government body responsible for the water environment for flooding. They have been in extensive dialogues with the applicant to consider impacts on the water environment, to consider impacts in respect to flooding. They are satisfied that the proposal would provide suitable mitigation to deal with those matters. SEPA has also granted a PPC permit for this development, which provides an additional layer of amenity protection and an additional layer of protection for the natural environment. That PPC permit includes a number of conditions that requires ongoing monitoring of matters relating to odour, pollution and associated impacts on amenity and on the natural environment. The application is for agricultural development on agricultural land in an agricultural landscape. Information submitted with the application suggests that there is a need for additional domestic egg supply, and this application would potentially help to address some of that shortfall to some extent at least. Planning legislation requires planning decisions to be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. On balance, officers are satisfied that the development is broadly consistent with the development plan policy. There aren't considered to be any material considerations which justify refusal of planning permission, and on that basis the application is recommended for conditional approval.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. That's a very full presentation. Thanks for that. We'll start off with members if they have any questions of Mr Taylor on this application. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks to Mr Taylor for a full description of what is a very complex set of papers. I have a couple of questions. Really, it's disposal of waste. One, presumably chicken carcasses, and secondly, and perhaps I'd like more information about the proposals for disposal of the chicken manure. Where is that going to be disposed of, and how can we as a council control that?
So there is quite a lot of discussion in the committee report about manure management. So the development would produce chicken manure, which would be dried within the building. It would be taken off site and it would be used on agricultural land, both operated or used by the applicant on the applicant's agricultural land, and some of the manure would be sold to third parties. Now that is something which happens in the agricultural environment regardless of any decision on this planning application. The information we have submitted suggests that manure would be stored and used in accordance with a methodology which would minimise environmental impact as far as is reasonably possible. So storage of manure would not be within 400 metres of residential property, for example. Manure which is spread on fields requires to be ploughed into fields within 24 hours of spreading. And these are rules that SEPA has which govern the agricultural environment in any case, and the manure management plan information submitted in association with the application is broadly consistent with those rules that SEPA have, and SEPA and our colleagues in environmental health are satisfied with the arrangements for the management of manure, the spreading of manure. It would be fair to say that beyond the applicant's landholding, it is very difficult for us to be absolutely sure where that manure is being used, but as I've suggested, this is an impact that would happen regardless of any decision on this planning application, and there is environmental legislation that the applicant needs to comply with. If there was an odour complaint, the council has powers to consider an odour complaint. If there is an environmental pollution issue, SEPA has powers to deal with that. I think the other matter you asked about was carcasses. So my understanding is that where there are carcasses, they are stored in freezers until such a time as they are taken off site and disposed of through a suitable sort of external contractor that would deal with that. I think that's probably accurate, yes. But the applicant may be able to provide you with more detail on that if I've not given.
Thank you. That's possibly something we could ask them. Yeah.
That's Councillor Duff. Councillor Dorn, will come to you next.
Thank you. And my question is just to around clarification as we discuss and think about this case. So just to confirm, because I like, I'm sure all the other members have read through all of the letters and all of the information presented as part of this case. So there's a lot of mention around free range, or what constitutes free range, and the views on free range hens or hen farming. But just to confirm, that isn't up for debate here. It's not a legal basis for our decision making today as councillors. We have to take heed of what the policies in MPF 4 to make the decision today. And it wouldn't be a legal basis for us to refuse this because of our views or not views against or for hen farming and the conditions relating to that. I just want to ask that question to be clear on that in the public discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. Section 7.5 of the report deals with that matter. I think if I've understood your question correctly, it deals with how the planning system should view ethical and moral considerations. They are not a material planning consideration. We do have to consider environmental impact associated with the development, and we have an environmental impact assessment report which deals with that. But you're correct, moral, ethical considerations are not material planning considerations.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr Taylor? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. And just as an aside, I'm very glad my colleague Heather has just asked that question, because that was in the back of my mind and I thought it was not material, but it's good to have that clarified, Mr Taylor. And thanks very much for this is a hard one because it's so in-depth, so it's good to get some good steer for the start. A couple of things that you mentioned. You mentioned the existing track. Now, I think this has come from roads, from what I remember reading, would be upgraded. So it would continue to be maintained then? That's just one question.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the proposed sheds in terms of egg collection, in terms of delivery and feed. So the information submitted suggests that the track which runs from the Eastern Meaty Farm complex in a westerly direction towards the development will be upgraded to allow year-round access. And yes, the applicant has made it clear that that was something that they would need to maintain in order to provide a suitable access to the development.
Ask a supplementary, Convener. Thanks, Mr Taylor. So again, I'll not go into depth. This is just mere questions to help me at the moment. But the flooding and drainage, and you speak about the floodplain of Spittal, and gave a positive feeling about that. SEPA seems to be fine. Could you tease that out slightly, given what we've just seen in flooding? I think it's important. The minute people read flooding in anything, they're panicking.
So the buildings themselves would be constructed on an elevated platform that's out with the functional floodplain, but that does result in the development building in the functional floodplain, which has a potential to displace waters. So the applicant's solution to that is to provide compensatory flood storage by reducing land levels to the west of the sheds, and the consequence of that will be no displacement, no increase in impact on parties out with the site in terms of flood risk. The range area which sits to the north of the sheds is currently floodplain and periodically floods, and that would continue to be the case. That is the case now, and that would continue to be the case. That area we planted it with trees, which may have some impact in terms of helping to manage floodwaters, unlikely to be massively significant. But SEPA has considered flood risk issues associated with the development. SEPA has seen the objections, including the very helpful photographs provided by third parties that show quite, a picture shows 1,000 words, but show quite clearly that that area can be subject to flooding. SEPA is satisfied that that issue is not one which makes the development unacceptable. The buildings themselves would be free from flooding.
Thank you.
Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Mr Taylor, I wondered about tree planting. This is part of the application and it's part of the mitigation against visual impact. Could you maybe expand on what you told us, and particularly about the maturity of the trees that might be planted? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Yes, absolutely. The conditions, I think the way they're worded, seek for a blend of both, I suppose, fairly junior trees, but also some more mature trees, because as you've correctly alluded to, it will take time for young trees to mature to have much of an impact in terms of mitigation. It's fairly characteristic of the landscape of land to the east of the site. You see quite a lot of development in that surrounding area. I can perhaps show a photograph. There are a number of tree planting mature trees along field boundaries, and that, in addition to what's proposed by the applicant, would in time help to mitigate the most significant impact. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a photograph to illustrate that. This isn't perhaps the best photograph, but you may be able to make out just above the existing East Meaty Farm complex, there's a line of trees. There are vertical and horizontal lines of trees, but what that does is it really helps to soften the existing development at East Meaty and further to the west. I think it's at Ladenford Farm. It reduces the impact of those buildings. So that is a pattern of development which is largely absent from the fields we're looking at today, but that is a pattern of development which we would like to see replicated, and the application is an opportunity to secure additional field boundary tree planting in those locations, which is quite successful in mitigating the impacts of existing development further to the east of the development. Wouldn't happen overnight, but that's something we feel would help mitigate impacts of the development in time. But there would be a mix of mature and junior trees planted.
Thank you.
That's Councillor Duff. Councillor Brace. Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, Convener. Ed, looking at National Policy Framework for Policy 5 Soils, you showed an image there where there's a significant amount of soil disruption. How do those two things conform, given that it says development proposals on prime agricultural land or land of lesser quality will only be supported where it's for essential infrastructure?
The policy is, my understanding of the policy is a bit wider than the part you've quoted. The policy does allow for the use of prime quality land for essential infrastructure, but also for the development associated with farms and associated with local food production. So there would be a direct impact on agricultural land. A permanent loss of agricultural land for around about 1.5 hectares where the buildings themselves will be formed. There would be some modifications to land levels elsewhere within the site, but that wouldn't be the permanent loss of agricultural land in that location. That could be brought back into a use in future. It's likely that the tree planting within the site would help soil health over time, but the most significant impact in terms of loss of land is the 1.5 hectare area where the building platform itself will be constructed upon. The rest wouldn't be permanently lost.
Does that include the flood mitigation site?
The flood mitigation area is a reduction in land levels measuring approximately 1 hectare. So that wouldn't be concreted on or anything like that. That would continue to be landscaped, or that would be landscaped and vegetated. So that wouldn't be potentially permanently lost of agricultural land. It obviously would have an impact on its value in the future by taking away some of the topsoil in that location. But we're not talking about building buildings in that location or concrete structures. So there is the potential for that land to be restored and reused for agriculture at the end of the operational life of the development.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, if I could indulge you with another question. If you can, just for those of us who are not intimately familiar with chicken rearing or egg production, when we call this free range, now the other way of doing it is caged. Now, I think most of us know what that means. Free range means that the chickens roost in the sheds, but then are open to wander around the surrounding ground. Am I correct? Is that assumption correct?
That is my understanding. I think the best person to answer detailed questions about the definitions of free range and exactly what that involves will be the applicant, who I understand will be addressing members shortly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
We have no other questions of Taylor. We will move to our list of speakers today. We have a number of speakers here on this item. Just for speakers' information, under Standing Order 12 of Angus Council, Applicants are given the opportunity to address any points which they wish the committee to take into account in coming to its decision. As convener, I have discretion to determine how long that may be. We have a number of objectors today, as we have a full agenda, but as is normal, each speaker will be given 5 minutes to speak. After 4 minutes, I will give you a 1 minute warning, which I would ask you to wind up on, so you don't go out with your time limits. And as a reminder, all our committee members have had all objections and letters of support, and there was many on this application to read. We have gone through it, so please, if you're going to repeat a lot of that, be very precise as to what you're saying. But we'll start with the first one on my list here, Mr. Mike Cumming. Mr. Cumming, if you come and sit down here and then switch on your microphone, and as I say, you have 5 minutes to address. And at the end of it, if you want to remain seated, because members may wish to ask you questions. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Mike Cumming. I recently retired after managing Lure Estate for over 30 years, which neighbours and shares an extensive boundary to the applicant's holdings. I know this area intimately. I brought up a family some 1.2 kilometres downwind of the proposed site at Leidenford Farm. I know the applicant well, and in many respects I admire his agricultural ambition. However, there's much more at stake than just that. The enclosed valley nestling between Balmashannon and Fotheringham Hill is an attractive place of distinctive character without any screening and affording wide-ranging views across the valley. This development cannot be claimed to be characteristic of the area. From the north, it will dominate the view, and because it will be on a very active flood area, it will be raised on an earth platform using major earthworks to reform the rising slope of Fotheringham Hill to provide, in my view, a rather speculative possible flood compensation area. The report tells us that in the event of extreme flooding, the building at least will not be surrounded in water on all sides. Well, that's okay then. One of the overarching principles of the new planning framework is the right development in the right place. This may or may not be the right development, but my God, it is certainly in the wrong place. And there's no amount of mitigation, land raising, reformation, tree planting and drainage can make this a suitable site for what is proposed. Look at the map. It was on the screen. The proposed site is referred to as the Mosslands of Meaty. I say that again, the Mosslands of Meaty. It's a reclaimed bog that for decades relied on pumped drainage. It's a floodplain, always was and always will be, and I watch it flood regularly. There are over 300 documents lodged in relation to this development. Many are lengthy and very technical in nature. Several were commissioned by the very business I managed. I have a good friend who's a saying that's relevant to many of these submissions, and that's that bullshit baffles brains. And many of these documents talk of fluvial mapping, mean flow rates, AODs, UEs, recessive colours, and so forth. And it's easy to adopt the conclusion, I'll let a lot of this wash over me, such technical papers from experts have to carry disproportional weight, yes? No, I refer back to what my friend described as bullshit baffles brains in a situation like this. Members of the committee, I urge you to use your own common sense as to what will happen if an intensive livestock unit is to be sited on the Mosslands of Meaty, cut into a significant hillside. It's going to flood, and although we've heard from SEPA, all those documents relate to the flooding, no one addresses the fact that the water will wash through the site and that the pollution from such flooding will enter the adjacent Spittal Barn. Your applicant was recently telling all and sundry in the local press of dead birds and significant flooding he recently suffered to his existing 32,000 bird unit, and that's situated on top of a hill. It's obvious what's going to happen should this building be allowed to be built on this site. And as a land manager, I fully understand why the applicant would choose as poorest land for such a development. I would too, but there lies the paradox. The Mosslands of Meaty is the least suitable piece of land to build such a structure. It's blatantly obvious. I would be the first to say that agricultural development should be supported, but not to the exclusion of common sense and the amenity interests of the local residential community. Local residents will no doubt speak in more detail of other adverse amenity aspects of this development, but lure farms have particular other concerns, and that is with about odour. This is something of which I have some experience in the existing smaller unit at Craignathrow. The planning report claims because there have been no complaints, there must be no problem. But there is a problem. We have complaints from holiday rental guests regularly, and several objections have raised this issue.
Mr. Cumming, you've got 1 more minute. Okay.
Okay. This development will triple the poultry units in a small area and triple the associated odour problem, which I believe will extend to the town of Forfar. I do not believe that planning conditions control this sort of intermittent problem which degrades the local amenity. I believe the adverse effects of this development will be significantly underplayed, particularly relating to the flood risk and resultant pollution. It's folly to build an intensive livestock building on such a site, and as a representative of Lure Farms, I urge the committee to refuse this application.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Cumming. Just remain seated for a second. Do members have any questions for Mr. Cumming? Councillor Durno.
That's it. Thanks, Mr. Cumming, for coming today. You obviously know the area really well. The question I would pose to yourself is, if you were advising the applicant just as a friend, do you know of a particularly other site in that area that would be more suitable than this one?
The applicant has significant land area adjacent to the site, many of which would be suitable. I would have thought that any of the other land would be more suitable than the one that's been chosen.
Any other questions? Councillor Brays.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cumming. You said that this development would be very uncharacteristic of that particular valley location. But would you not accept that such development is uncharacteristic of anywhere? Because this is relatively new building styles, which came about because of the move away from battery egg production in intensive cages onto the free range system, which was basically pushed by law. So would you not accept that it's, well, basically uncharacteristic of any area? There's nowhere that you could put a hen shed in Angus such as this that would be typical and characteristic of the area.
No, I would accept much of what you say. But what I would say is we're seeing a move away from what was characteristic, is that farm development tended to be in a cluster around the original farmstead. These intensive livestock units bring a completely new dimension. It's because they're moving away from farmsteadings. They're being situated in open countryside. This is a new move. This is not something you wouldn't normally see. Potato cold stores built in the middle of open countryside. You wouldn't normally see livestock cattle buildings built in the middle of open countryside. They'd be clustered around existing farm buildings. These chicken sheds are a different dimension for all the reasons we've mentioned about the distance away they need to be from other holdings.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Mr. Cummings, for coming along today and also for your written submissions. You obviously know the area well. I did a drive around the last few days to try and get my bearings, and the existing chicken shed, I had trouble finding it because it was sort of concealed behind. It's quite high up and it's concealed behind hills. Is that quite close to the applicant's farm?
Yes, it is. It's very close to the farm of Craignathrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Cumming? Nope. Okay, Mr. Cumming, thanks very much. You can take your seat again. We have Mr. Douglas Watt. Mr. Watt, if you want to come forward. Mr. Watt, I know you have some slides which Mr. Taylor will control. If you want to speak to them during your presentation, again, 5 minutes as I mentioned before, and I'll give you 1 minute to wind up. Okay? If you can.
Sorry, just... Yes, thank you. Okay. No, just when I ask you for the first slide, please. Not just now, not this precise moment. No, I'll ask him when I say first slide, could you pop the slide up when I say that, please? Is that your first slide? Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking up there. Yes, if it's up, just leave it. It's not a problem. Yeah, sorry about that. My apologies. Okay, I'll kick off. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Douglas Watt, and my home at Easter Meathie is only 68 metres away from the edge of the proposed range. My neighbour's home will be only 7 metres from the range, separated only by the proposed access road to the sheds, down which all traffic will flow. They will have an uninterrupted view of these massive sheds, which will be only 350 metres away, directly in front of their house. This proposal will impact greatly on our quality of life, and we will be subjected to all the emissions and noise from the sheds, the traffic, and the hens. This seems to be justified by a great shortage of free-range eggs and the change to the caged eggs, despite the fact that Craignathrow itself is currently only producing barn eggs, which is another category of eggs. In section 8.51, the department supports this using unsubstantiated information not available to anyone else and quoting a single statistic about 125% increase in imports in the 12-month period to August 23. We do not know who supplied this information, what it says, and how it was verified. It took me 5 minutes to establish that the percentage quoted is wrong and misleading. So, if you look at this slide here, Table A shows the import statistics from the government website. The 125% increase applies only to the month of August, not the period. To get the period increase, you must compare the 12 months to August, as in Table B, if you can make that out, which gives an increase of only 37%. Vastly different from the 125. I've also noted at the bottom of the table there the total annual UK production of 869 million dozen eggs. This is what all the figures are quoted in, and 830 million in the year to 23. So that's in comparison to the 37 million dozen eggs imported in that period of August up to August 22, and the 51 million imported to the period to August 23. Next slide, please. This slide gives the UK production breakdown of the associated with the associated import and export figures alongside. By netting off the imports and the exports, you will see that the UK has a self-sufficiency of between 99 to 96%. Free-range production has fallen by 11% over 2 years, and whilst it is recognised that there has been turmoil in the industry due to avian flu and Ukraine, bodies such as the Grocer Magazine, etc., have stated at the beginning of this year that the suppliers are insisting that any supply crisis is over. Now, cages were legally banned in 2012. And we now have what's called enriched colony cages, which will still be legal after the proposed ban in 2025, along with barn eggs. Okay? The proposed ban is purely voluntary and self-imposed. There is no specific date for the implementation, and no one has any idea as to who or what sectors it will affect. Cage producers will protect their investment by moving into barn eggs, as seen in the statistics and at Craignathrow. The egg market is split about 66% retail and 34% manufacturing for food products, etc. The retail sector is dominated by multiples who strictly control prices. At 60% of UK production, the bulk of free-range eggs will go to the retail sector, so any proposed ban on cages will have little impact on the free-range market. In September 23, the British Free-Range Egg Producers Association predicted that the national flock size in January 25 will be 4.4 million enriched colony cages, the barn flock will double to 5.5 million, and the free-range stock of birds will remain static at 28 million birds. It seems that the barn eggs is where the smart money is going, and that's confirmed by Crignathril. In my letter, I also noted that planning applications have fallen back dramatically to an all-time low. The free-range egg supply is stabilising, there is no significant shortage of eggs, and despite peaks and troughs, there is no flood of imported eggs in comparison to the size of the UK market.
So what, got 1 more minute, okay?
All right, next slide, please. I would also draw your attention to sections 83.4 and 0.5 about the pollution prevention control permit. This is the drainage arrangements proposed in the initial planning application. And if I could have the next slide, please. And these are the revised drainage arrangements put through on the PPC. Now, firstly, the planning application proposes constructing bunds and swales in the floodplain, which is not permitted or approved. Secondly, SEPA have never specifically approved these drainage plans, as it seemed to get lost in the flood mitigation schemes. Thirdly, the applicant was so lacking in confidence in this plan that he lodged a completely different one with the PPC application. It's obvious the applicant has no faith in his own plans. Now we are told the applicant intends to address an inconsistency. What does that mean and how will it be enforced? I wrote to the department in April 23 pointing out these differences, and yet we are still here almost a year later without any definitive accepted drainage solution and only the applicant's intention to do something. This has never been noted in the planning portal.
Okay, Mr. We'll have to go stop at that, Mr.
Okay.
Watt. If you remain in your seat in case any members have any questions for yourself, we move on. Any questions for Mr. Douglas Watt? No. Oh, Councillor Braze, okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Duff.
I've got my hand on the button, so I'll go.
I do mean Councillor Duff. I do apologise. Sorry.
Yeah, just 1 point, Mr. Watt. You're referring to barn eggs. Now, I was trying to tease from Mr. Taylor earlier exactly what we were talking about for those of us that are not of an agricultural bent. What do you mean by barn eggs?
You have 4 classifications of eggs. Okay? You have enriched colony eggs, whichever one refers to.
Mr. Watt, put your microphone on, please.
Sorry, you have 4 categories of eggs, okay, in the UK market, and that's the only unique selling point that eggs have, because an egg is an egg is an egg, okay. So it's very important that this, this classification is observed. So you have enriched colony eggs, which everyone goes around calling caged eggs, but remember I said that caged eggs, which people might consider that, were banned in 2012. These enriched colony eggs are perfectly legal, and they will remain legal even after this, what's known as a voluntary ban. They will still be in production. There will be no stopping of the production of these eggs. You then have, moving slightly higher up, you have barn eggs, which are basically free-range eggs, if you want to think about that, but they're all locked in. They do not get out to move. They have no access to free ground. They are kept. They are able to roam around the shed. Caged eggs, by definition, they can't move about the shed. Barn eggs can move about the shed, but they cannot access the outside. Free-range eggs, the definition of that is that the birds have to be able to access an outside territory during the hours of daylight. And there are minimum stocking densities required, which is why Crignathril, or the applicant, requires 40 hectares of land to accommodate 64,000 birds. You have one more category, and that is organic. And that's basically what it says. It means they're allowed to wander around and feed and not given any sort of supplements and stuff like that. So the bulk of the market, 60% of the production is free range, but the other 34% of production is made up by enriched colony eggs and by barn eggs. So they are cheaper than the free range, and they go mainly to the manufacturers, the food products and all that kind of stuff on that one. So when people start to come out of the enriched cages, okay, the caged eggs, and this is purely a voluntary ban, no legal basis whatsoever, they will probably, because it's cheaper, move into barn eggs. And that's why you're seeing a significant growth in the barn egg side of things. Crignathril themselves, they started off up at the top of the hill with free range. But when I was up there, the birds to go out into the range, they've all been closed. The birds are no longer free range, they are barn eggs, which is a lower classification. Yet we're being asked to approve here a free range application on ground which is totally unsuitable.
We'll get delving into territory away from the actual full application. Is there any other questions for Mr. Watt at this stage? We have other objectives. Very quickly, Councillor Dunham.
Thanks, Mr. Watt. Can I just ask, if the actual building didn't contain poultry, okay, say it was a fish factory, say it was, I don't know, produced Brussels sprouts, whatever, is it the building you're objecting to, or is it what the building is being used for you're objecting to?
It's primarily the building, because it's such an intrusion on the land, and you're building on a floodplain. We also have objections to the emissions and the noise and the smells that will come out of the building, because it is hens. If you put a fish factory there, I would object to the smell on that one as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. That's fine for you. Thank you very much indeed. We also have, I think, your brother, Mr. Stewart Watt, wants to come up. Same again, Mr. Watt, if you want to switch on your microphone and make your presentation, I'll give you 4 minutes and let you know when you've got a minute to wind up, and then if you remain seated for
Just putting up this slide.
any speak. Oh, you've got some slides again. Okay. Okay, we'll start your time from when this.
Good morning. My name's Stuart Watt. I have lived at Cadham near East Meaty for over 30 years and was a daily commuter to the A90 along the Canmore Strait between Loughlands and Ladenford. I saw regular flooding below Fotheringham Hill, and after my brother Douglas Watt moved to East Meaty, I learned more about the hydrology of the Moss of Meaty. One important point of personal concern is also the surface of the Canmore Strait roadway, liable to regular flooding from fields to the north and on a very high water table. Because of the Council's financial constraints, repairs to many recurring potholes are made on an irregular and individual basis. Many oversized heavy vehicles using the road on a weekly basis would make matters much worse. Picture 1 here is the SEPA flood map with the range and the shed's positions marked. The area floods every year. You will note that the shed is immediately adjacent to the right area of flood, to the area to the right of flooding. The platform will sit just above that blue area. Could I have pictures 2, 3 and 4 in succession, please? You will see that the flood area on the map closely corresponds with the actual flooding in November 22 and October 23. That's 22. There's 23, please. Next picture. That's the site of the hen sheds. And number 4, please. This is the actual Spittle burn. And you can see the extent of the overflow from the burn. The burn is about 4 to 5 feet deep. The floodwaters here are 2 feet deep, and the area floods more often than just these 2 occasions. When flooding recedes, the ground is waterlogged and seldom dries out in winter. Next picture, please. The flooded land attracts wild birds, particularly migratory birds, with the risk of avian flu. It is a basic principle of free-range hen husbandry that the ranges should be kept dry to avoid this. You can see the birds, actually sitting on the water. SEPA state that nothing should be built on a functioning floodplain, and they will only very exceptionally grant permission if suitable flood mitigation procedures are adopted. While this policy is reinforced by NPF4 Policy 22, no specific details about how have been provided to the committee. Next picture, please. The flood mitigation plans are in this moment, I'll come to that in a moment. The flood mitigation plans are at the moment, in essence, to dig a big hole for floodwater and build a raised platform about 1.5 metres high. In flooding, the platform would be surrounded by water to the west, north and east, leaving no access for the hens to any dry land. Nothing has been provided through the planning portal, but SEPA states that the development is connected to higher ground to the north. It is actually to the south, and suggests combining the 2 flocks. That would double the stocking density against free-range regulations. The only possible connection to the only dry ground for many winter weeks is a very narrow neck of land for 32,000 birds, and currently the plans show a fence across it to maintain density totals. So, clearly, flood mitigation devices are solely to try to prevent the shed's flooding, as happened at Craignathrow's first shed last October, despite its position on a hill. No matter what provision is made, this area will flood, as it has done for many years, and this will get worse as annual rainfall increases. Based on the experience at Craignathrowr and allowing for the fact that there will be twice the number of birds, the hens strip bare a scratch area around the sheds, becoming mud during flooding, reducing access for the hens to other parts of the range.
One more minute.
Okay, this is picture 7, which depicts the south slope of Porringham Hill, and the volume of water coming off the steep southern slope will erode soil into the drains blocking them. Section 8.35 of the report states available information and consultee advice suggests that the risk of flooding at the site are understood and can be addressed. There is no evidence through the planning portal that the applicant has fully understood the issues, as the discussion between the applicant, SEPA and the planning authority appears to have been off the record, if indeed it has taken place in any depth at all. This has effectively prevented independent scrutiny. Unless the intention is in fact to allow the covert establishment of a barn egg provision, as has already happened at the Craignathrowr shed, given the major considerations still to be clarified on the planning portal, such as even the position of the swales, I ask that the committee today defer a decision until significant missing information can be provided for its further consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watt. That's very good of you. Any questions for Mr. Stuart Watt from members? Councillor Clark, so apologies to.
Thanks very much. The other Mr. Watt. Just your last comment there, insofar as the deferral, I could hardly hear what you were saying. So could you repeat that for me, please?
Sorry, I will repeat it. Unless the intention is, in fact, to allow the covert establishment of a barn egg provision, as has already happened at the Craignathrowr shed, the major considerations still to be clarified on the planning portal, such as even the position of the swales, lead me to ask that perhaps the committee needs to have more information before it can reach a final decision about this very complex situation.
Got it now. Thanks, Convener.
Any other questions to Mr. Stuart Watt? Okay, Mr. Watt, you can go ahead. Thank you for your contribution. We have now, I think, is it Miss Annie Whitehead, who I think you're speaking on behalf of somebody who can't be here too, but has lodged an objection, Mr. Bill Atkinson. I won't repeat everything I've said to everybody else, but you've got the gist. So, 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This committee will likely rubber stamp this application as it has no teeth in the face of intensive agriculture. What can you do? Angus Council planning regulations seem to have nothing in the face of unsustainable, intensive modern agriculture. I take this opportunity to suggest they need a rewriting sharpish. There is an inkling of discomfort among you about the lack of any agency or body capable of monitoring the pollution this development will undoubtedly cause. But as you have said, that is not your concern. But whose concern is it? I propose it is the concern of all of us right now. You have the privilege of being in a position to make a decision to care for the future of our soils, air and water, to do something that will have a lasting impact. IPUs are intensive farming which has been proven to damage our environment. Intensive farming is unsustainable. These units last only a few years until infection requires decommission, by which time the multinationals have stripped their profits from us and moved on. Approving this application is short-termism and does nothing for future generations. This business is a fast buck. It's not truly entrepreneurial at all. It's a pyramid of advantage taking with the environment at the bottom of the heap. Look for a moment what has happened to the River Wye. IPUs are absolutely implicated in the tragic death of this river and its network of tributaries, streams and ditches. We cannot for a moment allow that to happen to any other river, such as the Lunan or other beautiful rivers in our area. SEPA is detailed with monitoring and prosecuting, but knowing that it is understaffed, underfunded and has not enough leverage, why pass this application? Knowing that pollution will occur, why pass this application? Why not vote against it? Why not stand up for our soils, our air and our water, our future generations? Grandpa, great-grandma, why did you approve an IPU known to pollute? Think ahead. Think of school-aged children in the future asking, why can't we swim in the river or sea? Why can't we breathe clean air? Why do we have asthma and autoimmune conditions? Why do we not have antibiotics? Why not tread as lightly as possible right now for all our futures? Objectors' submissions are made available for the committee. May I ask for a show of hands? Have each and all of you read all of them? There will be a moment here for us to ask questions, and I'm glad that you are
Ms Whitehead,
taking this opportunity.
can I interrupt you for a second? It's not for objectors to ask questions of council members on this committee, but carry on just now.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have been asking us, the constituents, questions. We've conducted months of research into this development and other IPUs. We live in the vicinity. Unlike the designers, sponsors and agents, we walk the land and see day to day the specific effects of pollution on watercourses, air quality and soil. We swim and sail on the sea and rivers into which the watercourses flow. As you will have seen in objectors' submissions, photos of most of the northern range under 60 centimetres of water. If half of the range is saturated, this results in twice as many birds as legally permitted ranging on the dry area, double the stocking density. A waterlogged range with hen feed nearby will be heaven for migrating birds. No biosecurity can prevent transmission of avian flu in this instance. If the land is fully drained, where will the flooding from a rising water table go? We can't keep displacing water and not expect impact on housing, businesses and roads. If the hens are kept indoors because of flooding, avian flu, etc., then free range is yet again a lie. Do you want to aid and abet this deception? It is well documented that avian flu arises in intensive units and from there is transmitted into the wild. You've seen our beaches recently and repeatedly strewn with dead birds. Do you want to aid and abet this kind of disaster? Please vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms Whitehead. I know you're speaking on behalf of another objector, but do any of our members have any questions? No, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr Mike Rushforth. Is he here? Mr Rushforth? Good morning. Again, same self applies again. So after 4 minutes, I'll give you a minute's warning, okay? If you put down on your microphone and start your presentation.
Right, thank you, Mr Convener, and it's a pleasure to be in front of the committee rather than in front of a screen. This application conflicts with the requirements of the local development plan and is unacceptable on ethical, animal welfare and environmental grounds. This is an application to build an industrial poultry unit producing free-range eggs on a recognised floodplain. It is accepted that 50% of this range area will be under 2 feet of water for many months of the year. 50% of the hens will therefore find it impossible to range freely and clearly will not be producing free-range eggs. Now, I understand that this is not a material consideration for the committee, but it is an ethical concern, and I do feel it colours the quality of this application. If building on a floodplain alone was not enough to condemn this application, then any reasonably minded person would recognise that the application conflicts with many of the requirements of the local development plan, such as sections PV 2, 6, 11, 12, 14 and 20. I'm not given time to go into detail, but it does contravene the regulations because there is no listing of alternatives. There is no consideration of alternative farm development or farm diversification options. There's no explanation of the reasons for the selection of this preferred development and its location. I find this particularly concerning because it is known that biotoxins are released by this type of development, and yet nearby there are residential properties downwind of the site. I live near a similar industrial poultry unit, which this committee nodded through this planning process last year. However, in the past 6 months, this unit started operating, and we have seen that what has been built and how it is operated differs significantly from what was described in the application which you approved. So the question is, do Angus Council and SEPA have the resources to monitor and challenge these environmentally hazardous installations so that residents can be reassured that they will be operated in a safe and responsible manner? Now, I understand that my comments here will go unheard by the farming lobby on this committee, who will soon be falling over themselves to speak out.
Convener, I'm really uncomfortable with the way that this, for a start, suggesting that we nod through anything in this committee, I find really contemptuous of us. And then for him to be speaking about a farming lobby in this committee, I think it's totally unacceptable.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Basie, I've got to say actually, Mr. I was just about to stop you myself at that point. Please don't make any suppositions on anything. And we are here as elected members and not to represent any section of the community. So if you just make actual subjective points in relative to the application, not to who's determining it, please.
Okay. We will hear about food security, but the UK, has been demonstrated, is 95% self-sufficient in egg production. The report cites an increase in egg imports as part of the justification for this development, but egg imports go into industrial applications, so any increase in imports would not affect the demand from our domestic free-range sector. Our free-range egg production is sold almost exclusively through supermarkets. These are the same supermarkets who are desperate to encourage developments of this type to generate an oversupply situation so that they can drive down egg prices again, as they did a few years ago.
So 1 more minute, please.
Yes, thank you. Another common trope is reduced food miles, but these eggs will be transported to distribution depots, probably in the central belt of Scotland, but perhaps even further south, before they are then shipped back to Lidl in Forfar or Fort William. So nothing new there. There will be a new local source of chicken manure, and the damage that this will potentially do to our burns, waterways and environment will be ignored. Industrial units of this size produce 4.8 million kilograms of greenhouse gas equivalents per annum, and it is the responsibility of committees like this to look at these applications to see what can be done to control emissions and stop Scotland flatlining on the emission of greenhouse gases, as it has done over the last 10 years.
Okay, Mr. Rushworth, to stop you there, then that's 5 minutes is up, and even with the allowance for discussion. Are there any questions from the committee members? Okay, Mr. Rushworth, thanks for your contribution. Thank you very much. We have the applicant and representative from Cogio, Matthew Steele and Dave Anderson. Can I just ask you, are you here to make the presentation or just to answer questions? Or
I'll make a short presentation.
Okay, and then be up for questions after that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, again, we'll allow against 5 minutes again for yourselves. Okay, so if you want to, so whoever is speaking, introduce yourselves first and then we'll move on.
Good morning, councillors. I am Matthew Steele, the applicant who owns Craignathrow Eggs and runs Craignathrow Eggs. We are not a multinational company. We are local farmers. In fact, we're a small land-based rural business. I don't have anything written out. I did have a lot of notes made through that, but there's too much to cover, so I'm just going to give you a brief history and then allow more time for questions, which I'm sure they'll come. So we are farming just outside Forfar. We're food producers and small-scale, currently energy producers. Potatoes and eggs are the two main agricultural outputs of our business, along with the traditional kind of Angus cropping rotation of cereals, oilseed rape. We put in cover crops for sheep grazing as well. So we're a very diverse business, producing quite a lot of food every year. I'm probably 3.5 generations. I don't use 3 because that's the one that blows it, so hopefully I'm not that one. But we're not quite 4 because my great-grandfather came from the Central Belt and he was a part-time electrician as well as subsidising his farming. We have grown our farming business over the years thanks to my ancestors, purely by producing food. We have had to increase production over the years to keep ourselves sustainable so that we may survive. And it's made life better, arguably, for our family over the years and also for our employees who we care deeply about. And we do employ roughly 5 full-time non-family members at the minute, in no small part due to our existing poultry operation, but also by expanding our potatoes and cereals and such like over the years. All part of a diverse farming business, which we enjoy running. I did start my first poultry unit in 2018. I was 20 years old when I first went out to get a contract from Glenrath Farms down in the Borders. We needed to expand to keep ourselves viable. Poultry was a great way of going into it. It didn't require a huge amount of land, and it created a big turnover off of a small area of land, and it made things sustainable for our business. And it not only kept me employed, but it also employed another one and a half, really 2 people actually over and above that, 2 young guys from Forfar, actually. This application that is before you today is really a natural extension to our existing egg business. It is a huge investment for us, make absolutely no bones about that. This is something that has not only been a couple of years in planning, but we've put a lot of thought into it, both through the siting and the need for eggs. I was at the NFUS conference last week. I helped to organise that, actually. And Robert Chapman from Farmley up in Aberdeenshire was saying just how short eggs are at the minute. And I'm also hearing that from our customer down at Glenrath as well. And I also used to work for Tesco for a year in a graduate programme. And so I still have some people I know there, and eggs are definitely short. In fact, Dave was telling us this morning he couldn't get eggs for Shrove Tuesday, which is today. He was around 3 supermarkets on Sunday. You would have seen Tesco and Forfars were short of eggs recently as well. That shortage is not going away. We are currently importing eggs from Poland, Italy and Spain, and they're coming into Glasgow market, mostly going into the wholesale market. This is a sector that I know pretty well. I've dedicated my full-time employ to agriculture, so there is a need for eggs, and it's been well documented by supporting evidence from our buyer. So to tell you a bit about the application, some of the good things, it's part of a really good circular agricultural economy. It will produce a lot of muck. There's been a lot said about that. I will no doubt have questions on that, but what hasn't been said is that muck is fantastic for the soil.
You've got 1 more minute.
No problem. It's fantastic for the soil. It helps build organic matter. It means that we can establish currently most of our winter cropping without the use of any synthetic agricultural chemical fertiliser. By building organic matter in the soil, we're helping to sequester carbon as well. This is an excellent source of NP and K for the soil, and all farmyard manures are, and the benefits of that cannot be downplayed. Furthermore, in that it will add what is currently 100 acres of actually cereal cropping down to trees and grass. Sustainability, 3 full-time jobs, helps our business stay sustainable. We move money between our arable and our poultry enterprises regularly because sometimes some are down, sometimes some are up, and it's really helpful. And not to mention the food security. I worked out roughly this morning, it will produce roughly twice the amount of calories as what continuously cropping wheat would be from this. So this really does help. We live in an ever more troubled world. Ukraine, Suez, the Houthis. We cannot take our food security for granted, and this is something that really helps that. So thank you. I'll open the floor for questions, and sorry I've spoke a bit too much.
No, that's fine. Thanks for your contribution. First of all, members' questions. Councillor Dunner, we'll start with yourself. If you turn your microphone on after Councillor Dunner asks the question, please.
Thanks, Matthew, for your presentation. I think it's admirable what you're doing because it's such a big project. But what the question I want to ask is, you're going to be investing such a lot of money in such a project. Why are you building it on, obviously, a field that has lots of water problems? When one of the local farmers has said that there is more land that's suitable, why give yourself all these problems? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely fair question. That is a floodplain to the north. I've stayed in the area. I stayed at Craignathra. I grew up there, and I actually stay at Eastermeath in the farmhouse now. My bedroom window looks right onto it. Where the shed is going to be sited does not flood. If that floods, the world has a big problem. There'll be far more areas much deeper underwater. We would not spend the level of investment that this project is going to be if there was any doubt in my mind, and also those that have been backed up by our consultants who we used at great expense to do it. If I thought there was going to be any danger of that shed flooding, I would not build it there because I would lose money and lose poultry, and it would just be an absolute disaster. So granted, we have had double the amount of rainfall that we normally get over the past few months. I was out in Storm Babbitt. It was something that I never want to repeat again. It was really terrible. So we have had an exceptionally wet winter. We've never been further behind with work, to be honest. That's how wet it has been. To say that that is underwater for most of the year is grossly inaccurate. I would say it would be, in a normal year, maybe 4 or 5 days of the year, because it's a floodplain. Yeah. So
you've answered the question.
Sorry.
Thanks. Councillor Brays.
Well, actually, Councillor Dunno asked the very question I was going to ask, and it's been fully answered. Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Thanks, Mr. Steele, for your presentation. I guess I had a couple of questions, one of which I attempted to get an answer from, I think, Mr. Taylor. He perhaps suggested you would be a better recipient of my question. I guess I've got two questions. The question about waste, both animal carcasses and manure, how you're proposing to dispose of those. And my second question is, I think one of the Mr. Watts suggested that in fact your existing unit is now effectively barn eggs, and we need to find and explain the difference between that and free range. Is that the case? And what's your real aspirations for the new development, I guess? So they've got the two questions, one about the waste and one about what is exactly we're approving today. Is it free range, or is it another barn production system?
Thank you very much for those questions. I'll deal with waste first. Currently, we use all of the manure from our existing operation, all within the establishment of our winter crops in autumn, which is over a roughly 2-week window. So there was a suggestion earlier that the smell lingers for most of the year. That is grossly inaccurate. Again, we ploughed down as soon as it spread, or as soon as feasibly possible it spread. Yes, it will smell for a couple of days. It's dung. When I left the house this morning, my neighbour was spreading cattle dung. It's a fact of living in the countryside. In fact, if we were in France, the sights and smells of the countryside are enshrined in law. But the muck from this building would, most of it would be used within our existing farming business. Since April 18 was when my first shed came online. I reckon I've had 7 or 8 people phone me throughout the years looking for chicken muck because they know the inherent properties of that manure for their soil and for their crops. So anything that I can't use myself, I'll be wanting to use as much as possible myself because I do not like buying in artificial fertiliser. would be sold elsewhere, which is common practice at the minute. There's lots of farms that buy dung or do straw for dung, that kind of thing. Carcasses. It's well audited and regulated. The disposal of carcasses is something that currently we would just expand what we're doing. So we've got a chest freezer off-site. It's actually within our existing farm buildings. We would maybe buy another chest freezer if there was more carcasses, and then we use a company called North East Fallen Stock. There are others available, Douglas Bray, and they are licensed waste disposal tech, or and they dispose of the carcasses. I think they're actually based down in Solway. Douglas Bray are up in Keith in Aberdeenshire. But this is all very well audited, which will bring me nicely on to my next point. We are free-range farmers. We are audited by 5 separate organisations on that. There are some occasions throughout the year with very good merit why chickens are kept inside. Historic or recent history, it's because of bird flu. If you're worming, you have to keep the birds inside. If you're doing range alterations, you have to keep the birds inside. There are many reasons why, if somebody is passing on any given day, the birds will be inside. But these make absolutely no dispute about it. These are free-range eggs. It's free-range eggs that the consumers are demanding at the minute. And it's free-range eggs through the consumers that the retailers are demanding, and that is where the market is. Barn, as Mr. Watt very correctly pointed out, is the same as free-range. It's just that they can't get out. But this is a free-range egg application.
Okay, thanks for that. There's a Councillor Duff. Do you have any more questions?
Convener, I kind of have got a follow-up question which might be convenient to take.
Go ahead.
Now.
Go ahead. Just now. We've got 2 of the others, but you go ahead with that.
Just really to tease out this issue about the excess manure. So you would sell that to other farmers in the area.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 farms that are there. The vast majority of them we would use within. I mean, we don't even touch our spring cropping with chicken manure at the minute. The only downside that I could see with that is that we are potato growers. There's some calcium in chicken manure, which can alter the pH or the likelihood of scab coming onto the tatties. We supply Tesco and Morrison's. They don't want scab, so that's the only thing that's meaning that we maybe wouldn't use it all ourselves. Is this perhaps incidents of blemishes in potatoes being too close to the rotation?
You okay with that, Councillor Duff? Okay, Councillor Bates, can I just put you on hold for a second? We've got 2 questions before. Councillor Nicholl, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Convener. Mr. Sale, there's great concern about the movement of heavy goods vehicles on the. When you've got cast hens and they get removed by the heavy goods, would would you be stocking in a phased manner to balance it over a period of time? And how long would it be prior to hens on site then going off as cast?
Okay, so due to biosecurity reasons, you really shouldn't phase anything. You want birds out as quickly as possible, and more for animal welfare as well. You don't want birds on lorries for any longer. The need be an RSPCA, who we are audited by, regulates that very closely. So they're all out. Our 32,000 bird unit we empty in about 5 hours. Probably would phase it 32,000 by 32,000 bird unit, so we'd maybe do one week and then the other the next week, so that it's more manageable, more from a labour point of view as well. And then once the spent hens go out, there's roughly a 3.5 week time frame where the sheds are power washed and disinfected, totally cleaned down. Everything's given a bit of a spring clean, really. And then the birds come back in at 16 weeks from the rearing farms, which is local at Bractillo, actually. And they'll go in 8,000 birds with roughly, it takes about 45 minutes or so. But yeah, I think I probably would, if it's past, split it 32,000 and 32,000. So it'll be slightly phased, just so we're not doing the 64,000 all in one go. But from a biosecurity point of view, you want it done as efficiently as possible.
Does that satisfy you?
How
Go ahead.
often, sorry, how often...
Go ahead, Councillor Nicholl. Does that satisfy you, or do you have another question?
You have another question, please.
Okay, go ahead.
How often or how long do the chickens stay on the farm? I mean, is this is not going to be a 6-monthly thing or a year thing, surely?
No, so our current flock, which is our 5th flock at Craignathrow, they went in mid-July, and they are going out at the beginning of January 25, so 17 months, roughly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dornan.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask a question around the discrepancy between the flooding plans within the licence application and then the full application, just so the I want to get your take on that and the reasons why. Thank you.
Defer to Dave Anderson from COGEO on this.
So, thank you, Councillor Doran. Just to clarify, it's the discrepancy between the PPC permit and the planning application. Yes, so there's a little bit in terms of the evolution of the project at this stage. So the PPC permit was granted last year. I think it was last April it was actually granted. PPC permit, it's an evolving process with SEPA. The idea is that it regulates the ongoing operation of the site. That's done independent of the planning process. During that PPC permit, which was made by a separate consultant without consultation with us, we've evolved the processing dialogue with SEPA and dialogue with the Council's Roads Department over flooding, and basically come up with a solution for the compensatory flood scheme. Essentially, that PPC permit has been granted, but it's granted subject to condition, much like the planning. The idea is to operate the actual operation of the shed, so the permit will be modified following the completion. So it'll be modified following the conditions that we have attached to the permission, but also be finalised as part of the operation. Any changes that go on in the future, should there be issues around about drainage, if there's any change of regulation, that would be the PPC permit that would encapsulate all of that. Does that clarify your question then, Councillor Dornan?
Yeah, thank you. I can just follow up on one point. So that PPC permit, is it continually assessed and looked at as part of that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's attached to the operation of the shed rather than being sort of static like the planning permission is.
I think it's every 4 years there's a full
audit.
Yeah. But it is something that's continuously assessed throughout those 4 year intervals as well.
Yeah, to make sure everything's compliant with the latest up-to-date legislation rather than the legislation as it sits today.
Okay, Councillor Brace, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thanks, Convener. I had a question before, but it was answered before I even got to that stage, and it was about audits, and you touched on that. Now, when I look at this application, it looks like an enormous investment, and you're obviously confident that you have a market for these eggs, or you wouldn't be going down this route at all. But I'm wondering, could you maybe give us a wee bit more idea about these 5 people that audit your production and the consequences that it would have for your business if you failed to comply with the audits and the conditions of the schemes that you're in? Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, primarily we were audited by Scottish Government, base standard throughout pigs, poultry, although it is pertinent to poultry, but they audit sheep, cattle, every kind of livestock. If they don't approve us, if we fail an audit and don't correct non-conformances, we can't keep chickens. It's as simple as that. Above that, there's BEIC, which is the red line. A much tougher audit, normally lasts about 6 hours, actually. Once a year, if you have no non-conformances, which I was very happy to report, our last 2 audits were no non-conformances, which is we're really happy about. That's a high standard of poultry welfare. in terms of UK standards, which are some of the highest in the world. We're also audited by our buyer, which is Glenrath Farms in this instance. They come up at least once a year to audit. And I should also mention that if we weren't audited by BEIC, then we cannot, I believe, sell into any of the UK retailers. It's all kind of Glasgow market type stuff and restaurants, that kind of stuff. And our market is retail. We're going for the retail market. Furthermore, you can get a spot audit by Tesco, which we have had in the past. These are unannounced, and they follow the same guidelines, although slightly higher than the BEIC one, which is about 6 hours long. And lastly, we are audited by RSPCA. If you want to sell, most of the UK retailers have signed up to the RSPCA welfare standards. These cover everything from day-old pullets, so as soon as that bird is born, is hatched even, right up until the moment its life's ended. RSPCA covers that whole process, and the UK retailers for a number of years now have insisted that MD who is supplying them is RSPCA assured as well. So those 5 separate bodies audit us at least annually. And if we fail, Scottish Government's terminal, you can't keep any hens, but if we fail RSPCA or BEIC, then I don't have a market for my eggs. And both RSPCA and BEIC, we were really pleased to report there was no non-conformances the last 2 audits, which is the last 2 years. If we do have critical non-conformance, then we go to 6 months auditing.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay, I don't see any other questions from the members, but I've got 1 or 2 I want to address myself from 1 points here. Could just, I accept what you're saying, in the majority of the time of the year, this land will not be flooded round about the buildings. If it is flooded, what would be your proposal for dealing with the birds?
During that, I would contact the Scottish Government officer to say, for various different reasons, we cannot get these birds out onto the range. Realistically, I think it would be the 16,000 in the north side. The other 48,000 would be able to range freely using the range that goes up the hill. But in these instances, it's a call. They're normally very understanding of it. They know that irregularities happen. Yeah. It's a call there, and then they know as soon as we birds back out again, when it's safe for them and safe for the ground and such like.
Okay. There's other small things that haven't been, 2 things haven't been addressed. I'll deal with one very small one first. The field drain that's referred to in the drainage here, how regularly is that cleaned?
Do you mean the spittle burner, the drain inside the field?
Well, it was the drain, I think, that there was more to the east of the, because there is going to be drainage, draining into that field drain.
We've got our own 360 digger, so we just maintain field drains as regularly as need be. It's not in our interest to let them not be maintained.
Okay. The bigger question I've got is, we've talked a lot about flood risk and things today, but one of the objectors have referred to odour. Mm-hmm. Now, on the odour assessments, we have your own report through COGEO that you've obviously requested and has been referred to. Other parties have got other third parties' reports, and there is marked differences in the reports between what COGEO have said on air quality and odour dispersion here against what other parties have said. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but that's a major concern for this committee. Could you address that?
Well, I'm going to let Dave address the technical point, but what I would say is that I'm not an absentee owner. I stay downwind of this development as well, and I really enjoy staying down there. I would not build this if I thought it was going to adversely affect neither myself nor my neighbours. This can be shown by the fact that we have 6 non-family, non-employee people staying downwind of our existing poultry shed at roughly 400 metres, so about the same distance. And we have had 0 complaints from them in 6 years of operation. So I'll let Dave answer that, but there's some kind of qualitative information regarding the odour as well, and no doubt Dave will be able to answer the more quantitative technical points on it.
Yeah, I think the issue I have with this is a sort of a general rule of thumb sort of comes in here, is that is it right we should be accepting these third-party reports? Now, I know it's absolutely fine to do it, but you pay a consultant to find a problem, they're going to find you a problem. The bit that it overlooks...
With respect, but you paid a consultant, you're being...
Yeah, no, but if I can finish what I'm saying, though, that actually leads into my point here, Councillor, because... You know, there's a real life consequence to this if we get this wrong. You know, my background's in renewables. You know, wind turbines create noise, the shadow flicker. You know, there's real world consequences. You turn those off when they go wrong, when they have an effect on amenity. Hen shed's exactly the same. This is not something you get to walk away from. You know, what we have to look and give absolute confidence to is Matthew, yes, he is our client, but our responsibility is to ensure that this is an operational unit that complies with the regulation, because that comes back to us. You know, is that we have a duty of care to our clients. We have a duty of care to the planning system. We've put this through for the experts to have a look at. And I'd like to ask members to consider which side did it fall on when the consultees came back. We have no consultee objection. Now, these are not amateurs we're passing these over to here at the likes of SEPA, the likes of your own environmental health department. And I'll be honest, I find it something very galling and something that my organisation will never be involved in. We have to trust the process. We have to trust the people who are experts in their field to be the ones that regulate the system for the greater good of all of us. And if it's up to consultants who are paid to find problems, guess what? They'll find problems. They will have differences of opinion, but I have absolute faith in both what we've presented, in how Matthew will operate his shed, and also that the regulatory bodies have done their job right, because it matters. There's a huge investment here.
Okay, thanks for that. I take it there's no further questions. Okay, thanks very much, gentlemen. If you want to retake your seats again. Moving on. I think, do we want to either take a 10-minute break at this point, because we've got a bit further to go yet, rather than finish this whole article off. So I'm going to just move under Standing Order 21, adjournment for 10 minutes for comfort break. Thank you. Okay.
Can we stop the live stream, please?
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Just before we move on, I'd like to pick up with two of our officers. I know, actually, Councillor Bayes, I think you would like to address a question to Mr Barnes from Transport.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I think one of the objectors raised the issue of the road surfaces and the, perhaps more potholes being caused because of traffic movements. Do you want to say something about that?
Thanks, Councillor Brace. Yeah, we maintain the roads in accordance with the best maintained highways guidance, and that would continue to be the case. The level of vehicles generated by this is not significant, so we really have no concerns in respect of the maintenance road.
Thank you.
Okay, from my point of view, I'd like to bring in Martin Petrie, who's one of our environmental health team. Martin, are you there?
Hi, Convener. Can you hear me?
Yes, Martin, thanks very much. Martin, just want you've probably listened to and heard the comments about particularly on odour assessment. I know environmental health had no concerns from all of this, but I'm assuming that you've seen both sides of applications from the applicant and from objectors on these reports. And have you addressed both of these, and from the point of view of EHO's decision on this, that you have no objection?
Yes, a member of my team looked at this application and all the aspects of it in great detail, taking into account both the objector and the applicant's assessments. And we're happy that based upon the assessment, given the planning conditions and the odour management plan, and also the fact that it will be controlled by PPC permit, that this shouldn't lead to any major issues with regard to air quality or odour.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for that. Right, and we will move to members' comments on the application. Would anyone wish to start? Councillor Beattie.
Thank you. Just going back to some of the comments made by the objectors, I'd just like to point out that we do not rubber stamp planning applications from the agricultural sector. We consider all of these papers very closely, and it's very time consuming. But on reading the papers, I too had concerns regarding several aspects of the development, and that was before I reached the objections. So I'm going to just sort of mention a couple of wee bits. So with regard to my concerns, I mean, I am also worried about the loss of amenity. Okay, for the area. I'm worried about the potential for pollution locally and the effect on the water courses downstream of the site. And it's because of this that I do not feel that this development meets the local development plan and NPF4 on a number of policies, including, amongst others, policy 4 for the NPF4, policy 14. And policy 22, and then for the local development plan, there's DS4, PV4, and PV14 again, amongst others. So, my comments on this is that, given the opportunity, I would move to refuse this application.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener, and I hope everybody can hear me.
Can I just a reminder on this, and it's just at the moment, just on comments. We don't need to hear whether you're going to actually agree to it or at the moment, just comments on the application.
Thank you. But just for background to a certain extent, and I think it's important today, having listened to so much that I've listened, I'm a local member, one of the two that are on this committee, and although not born in Forfar, have vast experience as an elected member on planning committees, having served a long time in another authority. So I might be new to here, but I'm not new to this sort of job. So I think it's unfortunate when people do feel minded and get quite scared. I can understand it and make certain assumptions. So I just wanted to say that. We are obliged as elected members to read what's in front of us, and to the best of our abilities. I don't know a councillor that doesn't do that. Doesn't matter what your stripe is. So that would be my comment today before I get into how I'm going to vote, Convener.
Councillor Durno.
The world's changing and things are changing. And NPF4 seeks to promote rural revitalisation by encouraging sustainable development in rural areas. And the ALDP provides opportunities for an appropriate diversion of the rural economy. The proposed development is related to an existing agricultural business that proposes an agricultural use in a rural area where agriculture is the predominant land use. I feel because the world is changing and the situation that countries are in, I think sometimes we have to move forward with more technical ideas than maybe we had done before in agriculture, and we have to move forward with these and not be afraid of what's in front of us. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Donald. Is there any? Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I jotted down, I think, 13 concerns I had. Some of them I've added to as we've gone on this morning, and quite a lot of those ones are things that have been addressed. Some of them, I think, are, if you like, above our pay grade. Avian flu, you know, is a matter for government, I think, not for ourselves. There is questions about SEPO's capabilities to police anything. Again, that's not really a matter for us, it's a matter for government. We have to assume that they will do the job. The concerns I have, I think, is this development too big for this location? And I'm really quite concerned that they aren't able to consume all the waste that they generate. We're talking about manure waste. That's going to have to be shipped to somebody else, and as a council we will then lose control of it. And if they can't use all the waste product, for me that's not a sustainable development, and I think I would be concerned about that. That's my principal concerns. I think there is a nagging worry about the flooding issue. I know we've had SEPA assuring us it's okay, but we've seen the pictures. And the complaints from the farming sector are also unusual in my experience in those type of developments, and that's a bit of a concern.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Dorn?
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo some of the points just made then regarding some of the discussion that's gone on about the application today. We have to make decisions on this panel based on the policies available to us through MPF4 and through the local development plan. And those are the guidance that we have to make our decisions on. We can't bring in the kind of the ethical, moral things that we've discussed as well. And I think it's important to recognise that, and also a recognition of the information that we're getting from experts. We cannot say on this panel that we don't trust the expertise that's coming to us, because that is the expertise that is giving the information and has to act on it. We have to trust that information. It's not within our given to say we want to refuse an application because we don't trust that information, because it wouldn't stand up. And I just wanted to make that point around decision making on the planning applications. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dorn. I think Councillor Nicholl was next.
Thank you very much, convener. As a small-scale registered poultry keeper and inspected by DEFRA and everything, I know the majority of the complaints that come forward. I find the proposal in front of us very good, and the problems with the manure, it's not really a problem. It's a very great asset to the farming communities, and it saves using manufactured manures, etc., and it is very good for the environment. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Braze.
Well, a few points. We're required to look and consider the application that's before us today. We're not asked to consider some hypothetical application on a different piece of land. We have to look at what's before us today. We do have very strict very strict framework that we have to make our decision within. And but however strict it is, there's always grey areas in these matters, and that's why some councillors might come down on one side and other councillors on another, and we have to accept that. We are all lay people. We are not professionals, and that's why we have professional officers who give us guidance, and we have to take great cognizance of that. I feel that sometimes people come to this committee with objections or delegations, and they expect us to step out with that framework and to ignore our legal responsibilities to fit in with whatever it is that they want us to do, and we cannot do that. When it comes to the issue of manure, these things are all part of compliance schemes that everyone involved in agriculture is now audited for. The fact that manure might be leaving the farm and going somewhere else, well, this happens on a daily basis. Straw for dung deals, very common, so that all the nutrients are used in the most efficient way. It is a hugely valuable thing, and it's not really considered to be waste anymore. It's fertiliser, and people use it quite carefully, in my experience. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Brace. I can't see any other hands up. Okay, I'll take it from here in that case then, and if the room would allow me, I will have something to say really on all of this, and at some length. Sum up, I acknowledge the purpose and uses of this application and the need to meet demand for free range as opposed to barn and caged birds' eggs. I further acknowledge the 212 letters of representation that have been received regarding this application, despite a significant quantity of them being duplicates signed by different individuals or others created by one party and clearly circulated to others to add their comments. This form of representation I find extremely frustrating, and also I feel for my committee members rather than necessarily helpful, and we will address that in due course, where we will still comply, but we will, through Mrs Patterson, we will look at how we can actually manage that better going forward. The proposed development is related to an existing agricultural business and proposes an agricultural use in a rural area where agriculture is the predominant land use. Supporting information indicates that there's a need for additional free-range poultry buildings to meet the demand for free-range eggs. The information also indicates that there was insufficient egg production to meet market demand during 2023, as well as an increase in egg imports. The nature of the development is such that free-range hens require agricultural land to roam and forage. There is no suitable brownfield land in the vicinity that could accommodate this development. That said, published maps indicate that the area where the sheds would be constructed is classified as prime quality agricultural land. SEPA has advised that a PPC permit has been granted for the development, and that the permit includes conditions relating to the management of manure, emissions to air, water and land, odour, noise, and the protection of soil and groundwater. The permit indicates that all emissions to air from the installation shall be free from offensive odour outside of the site boundary. In respect of manure management, SEPA has indicated that general binding rules set minimum distances for the spreading of organic fertiliser, and the proposals in the manure management statement align with these rules. In respect of flooding, SEPA has indicated that the proposed compensatory flood risk storage is adequate to address the loss of flood storage created by the building platform. And SEPA notes that while the land to the north of the development is frequently inundated with floodwater from the Spittal Burn, it has indicated that the development would not be surrounded by floodwater, as it would be connected to higher ground to the south. More subjectively, the key consideration in relation to this development, as I see it, is whether it can operate without giving rise to unacceptable amenity or environmental impacts. Concerns raised by those that live in the vicinity of the site regarding impact on amenity are understandable, and the development would have some impact on the amenity of the area. However, the relevant planning consideration is whether impacts can be controlled, such that they do not exceed recognised limits and do not give rise to unacceptable impacts. The Environmental Impact Assessment Report and consultation responses indicate that environmental and amenity impacts can be managed such that they are not unacceptable, and planning conditions recommended would ensure this further. The matters raised in representations, both in objection and support, have been considered in preparing this report, and where appropriate, matters are addressed by proposed planning conditions. So we as a committee have to come to decision after consideration of this lengthy but necessary report. I'm conscious that SEPA have issued a PPC, as I say, for the site and for the operation, and the application takes account of this and the potential impact on air quality, odour, waste management and flood risk. We also have, as I've said, proposed planning conditions to mitigate many of the potential perceived impacts. There are concerns, and I acknowledge that, particularly between reports. I discussed that earlier this morning, I mentioned it earlier this morning. We have on one hand the reports produced by Cogio on behalf of the applicant, and we have other reports from the Airshed and Gavia and Environmental on behalf of Objectors. I'm well guided by officers as convener of this committee, and more often than not accept the recommendation. However, I need to be able to weigh up all things considered, and in doing so feel I can make a sound judgment to grant planning permission. It's very important to get out into the field and, pardon the pun, and see the areas where we're considering planning applications. And on this application, I've done that twice. And the second time was first thing this morning, going out and having a good look at the area again and what would be considered. I had initial apprehension for this application for all the reasons in the objections, but also gut feel, if you like. But a number of my concerns have been mitigated this morning, swayed perhaps by a very full report by Mr Taylor, reconsideration of what SEPA have issued on the PPC, and listening to the owner and operators of the land, that will be an ongoing certificate based on the operation of the site. This site will flood and will continue to flood, but I don't believe that this development will have a negative impact on any increased flooding. There is issues of amenity, there is also landscaping to be considered, visibility. However, taking account of all of these, I am going to, on this occasion, move acceptance of the planning application for a number of reasons that I've really just said. It's one that I initially felt unsure about. I do feel that we have our council officers and we have no consultees objecting to this. So I'm moving acceptance. Do I have a seconder?
I will accept.
Okay, first person up was Councillor McLaren. Thank you, Ms. Councillor McLaren. We'll take that. Are there anybody wishing to bring an amendment? Councillor Beattie, apologies, Councillor Beattie. Councillor Beattie, do you have a seconder? Councillor Clark?
So would Councillor Beattie just like to outline?
Yeah, okay. You've heard from himself. There's a motion on the amendment. Councillor Beattie, could we hear what you wish to bring in and the reasons for?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, so I would like to bring my motion for refusal on policy 4 of MPF4, natural places. I don't think that we know that there will be no significant adverse effects. Policy 5 on the soil disturbance, although Mr Taylor gave a very good description of what was happening, I still think there's significant soil disturbance on the site. Policy 14, I don't think it improves the quality of the landscape of the area. Policy 22, flood risk. The development states there that it should only be for essential infrastructure. I don't think this is essential infrastructure. Policy 29, and I don't think it's in keeping with the character of the area. DS1 of the Angus Local Development Plan, it states in the report that this is in the LDP for development, unless it's for set special circumstances. I don't think that's actually met. DS3, I don't think it contributes positively to the character and sense of place of the area. DS4, amenity, in terms of the odours, fumes and dust. Now, I appreciate that we've had conflicting statements there, and we've got a PPC which covers that. Let's have a look. PV4, this development is upstream of the River Tay Special Area Conservation. I don't think this proposal protects and enhances the nature conservation interests. It's physically connected through the waterways there. PV6, I don't think it protects and enhances the quality landscape in Angus, which echoes NPF4. PV12 again, the flood risk. I don't think it meets the conditions there. PV14 again, it does not enhance or maintain the water environment. I'm really concerned about nitrates and phosphates from the land ending up in the watercourse and then being carried downstream.
Councillor Clark, do you want to second and give any other comment to support your seconding?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Chris, well done. As a local member, just maybe a few bits of meat on the bone to a certain extent. As far as I'm concerned in my reading and research, which has been extensive, is particular on this, nothing should be built on floodplains except in very seriously mitigating circumstances, unquote. And it worries me. Climate change, stroke emergency, well, we've got plenty of evidence of that. We cannot make any kind of thoughts on what might happen. It's just beyond us. I read in a rural development part, I've got it all in front of me if anybody would like to check up on what I'm saying. A policy intent, cultural heritage are safeguarded and enhanced. No way. Policy outcome, a balanced, sustainable rural population. That needs to be the outcome. I don't see that. But something that I speak about a lot in my planning deliberations, and it was mentioned earlier, and sometimes we really should listen to people when they're speaking. And they say things, they'll say a lot of very interesting and educated things that they've researched. But the right development in the right place for me is supreme. And I don't see that here. I just don't see it. I'm not convinced. I've listened to the arguments, but I have to decide what I'm convinced by. I'm not convinced about the fecal matter in the surrounding water courses into the River Tay is being given enough consideration. You know, I could say as a layperson, how can I prove it? I don't have to prove that. That's my feeling. Not convinced about the disposal of carcasses. So, as a local member, and I'm very, very happy to have my scientist friend and colleague next to me to go through all that he did, but he's not saying anything I wouldn't have said. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Okay, so Councillor Duff, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I mean, planning is always a matter of balance. And as I said a few minutes ago, I had a number of concerns which I had over this development. I'm prepared to support Councillor Beattie's amendment. I would refer you to MPF 4, 12 zero waste, 14 place and flood 22. I quizzed the applicant about the manure situation, and I fully appreciate the chemical value of manure. That's not really the point. We are deliberately creating more manure which we can't cope with on site, and that for me is not a sustainable position. So I'm really saying, in my view, the development is too large for the land mass that the farmer owns, and that slightly comes into my gut feeling that it's too big, and that's effectively the place argument 14. I think it's too large a development. I'm concerned about building on a floodplain. That seems just fundamentally not a very bright thing to do. And I'm concerned also about then if we do get flooding, contamination going into the river. I think that is a concern as well. I think it's a difficult one for me. I'm very enthusiastic about supporting rural development and supporting farmers diversifying. I just think this development is perhaps too big a development in the wrong place, and for that reason, for me it's a tight decision. But I'm happy to support the amendment.
Do we go to a vote? If there's no comments, would you go to a vote?
Just ask if Councillor Beattie is happy to accept the additional reference to policy 12 on zero waste.
Okay. Just as I meant to say that, actually, just that on moving approval of the planning application, it's for the reasons and conditions included in the paper.
Thank you, Convener, for confirming that. So the motion by yourself, seconded by Councillor McLaren, is to approve the application as detailed, for the reasons and subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Clark, is to refuse the application for the reasons as outlined by Councillor Beattie during his speech. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Durno?
Motion.
Councillor Beattie?
Amendment.
Councillor Braze?
Motion.
Councillor Clark? Amendment. Councillor Doran?
Motion.
Councillor Duff?
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
The motion is carried by 7 votes to 3, Convener.
And that basis, planning application number 21/00602/FULM is hereby approved. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions today. We'll move on to...
Councillor Gall back.
Right, bring Councillor Gall back, yeah. Is back remotely, so we can carry on. Agenda item 7, look at the time. Agenda item 7 relates to report 37/24 for application submitted by Green Tech for the installation of a 25 megawatt solar array and associated infrastructure at a field northwest of Wellbank Farm. Ms. Porter is going to present the slides in this one.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, everyone. If you just bear with me 2 seconds while I share these slides. So, as the convener, an application for planning permission for the installation of a solar farm with an export capacity of up to 25 megawatts with ancillary infrastructure. It's for a period of up to 40 years. So this slide here, it shows the application site outlined in red in the centre of the image. Just gives you an idea of the context of the site. It's located in the countryside. Its current
Steps, the slides are jammed.
Oh, okay. 2 seconds. I'll stop and then try and reshare. My computer froze. Here we go. So yeah, as I was saying, it's in the countryside. Its current use is for agriculture, and it's also been used for Christmas tree cultivation. The site measures around 34 hectares. The orange line to the right-hand side of the image is the B978, and that travels through Wellbank. This would be utilised for construction traffic of the proposed development up to the point of this junction here, where it would come along this unclassified road up the western edge of the site, which is locally known as Chapel Road but officially named Carrot Road. Just as references both in the report. Up until the access point here, which is just the west-hand side of the development. This area here is also adjacent to the termination point of two core paths. Core paths run from this junction here along the bottom of Bidglarch Wood here, and from south to north past Braeside. We'll discuss that in a bit more detail later, as well as Dodd Hill, which is located up in the top-hand corner here. So in terms of the policy position, National Planning Framework 4 Policy 1 prioritises and gives significant weight to proposals that aim to address climate emergency. Policy 11 also lends support to renewable energy developments, and more details of those policies are included in Appendix 4 of your papers. So the policy is generally supportive of this type of development and acknowledges that these proposals can give rise to impacts, and some of these impacts are likely to be adverse, but this needs to be balanced against the desirability of providing renewable energy. The development would provide a source of renewable energy generation capable of meeting the electricity needs of around 6,800 homes per year, and that would make a reasonable contribution towards reducing reliance upon carbon emissions. Trying to go to the next slide. It doesn't want to. There we go. So this slide here, it shows the application site in a bit more detail, as well as the layout of the proposed development. As suggested on the previous slide, the access to the site is located here. It utilises an existing farm access. The beige coloured lines around the site are access tracks throughout the site. They generally follow existing field boundaries, and the pink rectangle in the bottom left-hand corner is the compound area for the site. It's also worth noting that West Wellbank Wood lines the western boundary of the site, and a former railway embankment located along the eastern boundary of the site. West Wellbank Wood was formerly located in this northern section here, and that's currently regenerating. It's also worthwhile pointing out the location of some key residential properties on this slide. We have Wellbank Farmhouse, Steading and new builds in this location here. We'll touch on that in a bit more detail later, as well as Ashgrove, this property located just at the bottom of the image. And there's a couple of properties located adjacent to the access on the western boundary of the site, where the single letter of representation that has been submitted in objection to the proposal has come from one of these properties here. This slide shows the elevation and the side elevation of the proposed panels. As you'll note, they're roughly 3 metres in height with a minimum ground clearance of around 80 centimetres. They are separated by 3.5 metre standoffs from each other. And in the bottom image, you can see the proposed security fencing which will surround the panels. This is roughly 2 metres in height, and we will have a number of CCTV posts dotted around the site as well, and these are roughly 3 metres in height. This slide here, it shows the compound layout in the right-hand side of the screen and an indication of the buildings which would be located within that. The top building here is the customer substation. The building below it is the inventor station. The storage containers, there's 2 of those within the compound, is on the bottom corner here. And you've got the distribution network operator substation, which is the tallest of the buildings, and that measures around 3.5 metres in height. And we've got a monitoring and communications cabin in the bottom right-hand image here. This does include a weather station post, which is illustrated in this element here, that would be roughly 5 metres in height, but the building itself is lower than the DNO substation. There is also a condition attached to well, recommended to regulate the precise finish of these buildings and structures. This slide here is an extract from the Council's Strategic Landscape Capacity Assessment for Solar Energy Guidance. The application site is located roughly in this region here. It is within the peachy colour, just south of this boundary line here, where there's the yellow landscape beyond. The application lies within the Dundee and Teelan subcategory area of the dip slope farmland landscape character type, which is generally characterised by the Sidlaws located to the north of this character type and Dundee to the south. This capacity study advises that the area has the capacity to be a landscape area with solar PV. And in landscape terms, the development would result in a change from arable land and commercial tree cultivation to land containing modern structures. Change will result in a change in the appearance and the texture of the fields, but landscape effects would occur over a very limited extent of the landscape character type, and the proposal has been designed in a manner which is broadly consistent with guidance. In terms of cumulative impacts, the extract here identifies 2 solar developments by these red sections here. However, both of these permissions have since lapsed and have not been implemented. However, notwithstanding that, the proposal has been considered in combination with other nearby solar and battery storage development and other developments such as electricity pylons and tunnels, and the area is identified as having medium capacity for solar development, and as previously noted, is a landscape type that can change to be a landscape with solar development. The proposal in isolation and in combination with developments in the immediate area would not result in an exceedance of that guidance threshold, and the cumulative impacts are not such that it substantially changes the landscape character of the wider area. This slide here is a bare earth ZTV, which indicates the theoretical visibility of the proposal in the surrounding area. Each of these dashed lines represents a 1 kilometre distance from the site. And this does not include consideration of existing buildings or vegetation which may be present on the ground. It only takes account of landform. And the areas in the deep purple colour are where theoretically 100% of the development may, reducing down to the lighter yellow colour, which indicates about 25% of the development may be visible. This slide also contains a number of viewpoints which are indicated by these numbers on the screen here. Again, we'll discuss this in a bit more detail later, but it's worth highlighting that number 6 in this area here relates to the location of Dodd Hill. Number 1 here relates to the location of Wellbank, Steddon and Farmhouse, and number 2 relates to the local road the south of the development. It's also worth highlighting at this stage that we'll touch on West Denside here, which is located directly to the north of the development, and East Denside, which is just to the northeast of the proposal. This slide also illustrates that there will be limited visibility of the proposal in low points surrounding the edge of the development. And I would point out that the objector's location is in this region here. Again, we're going back to the of the proposed site, but this time we'll focus a bit more on the existing planting and landforms features. So as I suggested earlier, there is an existing railway embankment along the eastern boundary of the site and well-established West Wellbank wood in this region here, and the woodland Westwood to the north, which is in the process of regenerating. You will also notice from this proposal that there is a standoff of the panels from this section of the eastern boundary. This area here relates to a high point in the landform, and as you'll see, there's no development proposed on that area. And again, the development-free zone between the Wellbank properties and the solar panels. So this slide here is the proposed landscaping plan for the proposal. As you will note, there's hedging proposed along areas of the northern boundary as well as the northeastern aspect here. and hedging proposed along the southern boundary. There's additional woodland planting proposed in the southwest as well as the southeast, and the proposal has been amended to increase the planting provision on that raised area of land in this region here. The proposal also seeks to retain historic features within the site, which relate in this instance to the stone dikes, which are illustrated by these dashed lines here, where the access track generally tends to follow these existing field boundaries. And there's also retaining a circular planted roundel in the middle of the site as well. In terms of visual impacts, we'll discuss that in a bit more detail later on, but in terms of other amenity impacts and concerns raised in the objection to the proposal, as I'll note again, the objector's property is located in this region here. Issues of noise impact and glint and glare have been assessed by our environmental health colleagues, and they consider that there have been no unacceptable impacts in respect of those matters, and conditions have been proposed to limit construction and operational noise and to ensure that glint and glare mitigation is provided should that be necessary. In terms of construction is anticipated to last for around 6 months, with a maximum of 9 HGV deliveries on average per day during the peak period, which is estimated to be month 2. And vehicle activity associated with the operation of the solar farm would be limited to around 2 trips every 6 months, and that's likely to be by a light goods vehicle as opposed to an HGV. The road service has considered the proposal and has offered no objection in respect of road traffic and pedestrian safety issues, subject to planning conditions to secure a construction traffic management plan and the provision of improvements to Chapel Road between the B978 and the access to the site here. So that's that road just on the left-hand side of the image. Additional vehicle and construction activity may generate some additional dust in the area, but that could also be the case with seasonal agricultural activities, which could operate in the area regardless of the outcome of this application. Furthermore, a dust and dirt management strategy, which includes wheel cleaning, is proposed to be controlled via condition. While there will be some additional activity during the construction phase, such activity would not be significant or unacceptably affect the privacy of occupants of nearby housing, and the proposal would not result in an unacceptable impact on residential amenity. The site is classed 3.1 prime quality agricultural land with an area of non-prime land in the west, roughly in this region here, 3.2. The site's not designated for natural heritage reasons, and the supporting information submitted by the applicant didn't identify any direct evidence of protected species located within the site. Given the historic agricultural use of the site, the main body of the site has limited biodiversity value. The biodiversity value of the site predominantly relates to the existing and established planting in the Roundel area and surrounding the boundaries of the site. The proposal seeks to retain these trees and in instances increase the planting in these areas, and a condition is suggested to secure restoration of the site upon decommissioning the development. In terms of built heritage, there's 2 Category B listed buildings located in proximity to the site. We have an aqueduct which is located in this region here in that tree woodland area on the southwest of the site, and Wellbank Farmhouse on the southeast of the site. However, the proposal would not give rise to unacceptable impacts on these listed buildings, given a combination of the nature of their special interests, their orientations, the distances involved, and the intervening landform and landscaping. The proposal also seeks to generally retain existing archaeological features, and the Council's Archaeology Service welcomes the standoff buffers proposed from surviving features such as the stone dikes. So there is no unacceptable impacts upon designated sites or features, and there's no objection from statutory consultees in these regards. This slide here might look similar to the earlier slide, however this is actually a modelled ZTV. This version of the zone of theoretical visibility includes modelling of land existing features on the ground, such as existing tree planting and buildings. As you'll see, it does reduce the visibility of the development and retains it predominantly to an area roughly 1 kilometre to the north of the site and about 600 metres to the south of the site, as indicated by these kind of pinky purple areas here. I would just highlight that this ZTV doesn't include any mitigation that would be provided by the proposed landscaping. It just considers existing landscaping at the site. So moving on to some viewpoints, I will go around the site and just discuss a couple of the viewpoints in a bit more detail. This slide here is a photo montage on the bottom image, which illustrates the panels in situ. Again, this doesn't include any landscaping proposed as part of the proposal, and obviously the image on the top of the slide is the existing view from this position at the site. As you can see, there's evidence of the Christmas tree planting in this area here. So this photo is taken from the region of Wellbank Stedden, whereas the Wellbank properties are around 40 metres from the application site, but around a minimum of 100 metres from the proposed panels, as this is evidenced by the field free of development in the foreground here. The proposal would be an obvious presence to those properties, and it would result in a significant extent of landscape change from what is currently there at the present, the arable field, to man-made development, but these impacts are not considered to be unacceptable. It's also worthwhile pointing out, just while we have these images on the screen, that West Wellbank Wood is illustrated by these trees in the background, where the objection property is located just behind here, and we can also evidence that there's a lower area of ground that just lines the southern boundary of the site in this region here. Moving on to the next location, this is slightly further, so obviously the previous slide was shown from roughly this region here, whereas this photo is taken from the local road to the south. So this is the local road to the south, facing northeast towards Wellbank Stedden, which is illustrated by these properties here. We could just see the kind of upper floors of these. And this is Ash Grove, which is discussed in the report, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail on this slide as well. As you'll see, the proposal would be visible from this location. It's also worthwhile highlighting at this stage that this, again, the photo montage on the bottom image doesn't include any of the proposed planting as part of the proposal. So, yes, there'd be an intervening field that would be free from development, and the development has been designed in a way to avoid the high level mound within the site, and again this illustrates there would be a standoff between the Wellbank properties to the east. The Wellbank properties would still have views of the proposal from their upper floors and area of higher ground. However, the railway embankment, which is illustrated by these line of trees, would provide a level of screening, as would the proposed planting. And there would be an arc of view from these properties in other directions which wouldn't be affected by the proposed panels. Ashbrook in the foreground here, it has its principal elevation which faces south, which faces away from the development, but it does have its real elevation, and its garden ground would have views to the north towards the development. These are quite open views. However, again, there would be a 180-metre standoff from the proposed panels, and the arc of view to the south of this property would be maintained. In general terms, the proposal would detract from the visual amenity of the occupants of these properties, and new woodland planting and hedging is proposed along the eastern and southeastern boundaries in this region here, and again up this woodland, the railway embankment area here. And this would provide a level of screening and but it is acknowledged that the planting would take some time to become effective, but the resultant visual impacts of the development could not be said to be such that it would make these dwellings or any dwellings in this general location an undesirable or unsatisfactory place to live. This viewpoint's the same location, but instead of facing in a northeasterly direction, it faces northwest. So it's the remainder, the kind of western extent of the development that's shown in this image here. As you can see, the West Wellbank Wood is a kind of containing feature for the western side of the development. It's also worth pointing out that this is Carrot Hill, located in the distance here. The proposed compound area would be located behind this front section of trees tucked in this area here, and the objection property is on the other side of the woodland here. Again, there would be planting proposed along the southern boundary between this location and the panels, roughly in this region here. But again, this would not fully obscure the proposed development from the South Road, but it would provide a level of mitigation as it matures. This slide here is a Google image. It's taken from the west of the site, facing towards the western boundary. As you'll see, Chapel Road dissects the image from kind of the left-hand side to the right-hand side. This image is actually taken from a short distance down the core path, where the termination of the core path is in this area here, and the access to the site is roughly in this region here, and there's a number of properties located in this location, where one of these is the location of the single objection submitted to the application. This image does illustrate that even in winter, West Wellbank Wood would provide a level of screening from the properties and the viewpoints in this area, and the development would be partially screened from the environs of the properties along Chapel Road, but would be intermittently visible on the approaches to these as you travel along Chapel Road, more so in further north and slightly further south, which is right and left-hand sides of this image. Where the development is visible, it would detract from the visual amenity of residents, but the properties would have other affected views in other directions, and the visual impact would not be significant that it would make the properties at this location an undesirable location to live. This image here is a viewpoint taken from the top of Dodd Hill, which I highlighted earlier on a number of the slides. Obviously, this is an elevated location. It's used for recreational purposes, and it gives an overview of the development in the landscape facing south. So Dodd Hill is about 1.6 kilometres from the development, and the proposal is illustrated on the top image by the orange area, and the bottom image is actually a photo montage of the proposal, which is illustrated the panels in situ. However, they do appear more so as a change in the colour and the fabric of the site, rather than a significant intervention in this from this position here. And again, this doesn't include any planting that would be proposed as part of the development. And as you can see, it's the location of the site is such that it would be relatively well screened from the western side, which is West Wellbank Wood here, and there's a number of existing planting features surrounding the other boundaries. So at this distance, the proposal would be apparent, but like as suggested earlier, it would be more so as a change in field colour and texture, but the layout has been designed in a way that it would retain existing field pattern, and this would aid in the proposal being absorbed into the existing patchwork of fields in the area. The proposal would not affect the full arc of view from this high location, and views of the landscape beyond and areas in the foreground would be unaffected by the development. I did suggest right at the start of the presentation that I would discuss properties at West Denside. They are located roughly in this region here. These properties are around 500 metres from the proposal. This intervening space would be undeveloped land. Again, that location is maybe not overly clear from this image here, but it is slightly elevated above the level of the site. And although this would occupy an arc of view of this property when viewing south, there would be other views from this property that would be unaffected, and there would be intervening planting around the properties in this proposal, in this location, sorry, and Westwood, it was roughly in this location here, that is set to regenerate over time. East Denside is a kind of similar location northeast of the proposal. It's actually located just off the image here to the left-hand side. It's on the opposite side of these polytunnels, which are illustrated by this grey patch of field here. So the properties at East Denside, they would have oblique views of the development, and again, they would be partially screened by existing landscape features and structures in the environment. In general terms, occupants and the users of these spaces would continue to enjoy a reasonable standard of visual amenity with largely uninterrupted views of the countryside in other directions. And the resultant visual impact of the development could not be such that it would make these dwellings or the general area an unsatisfactory place to live. So we'll just go back to this slide here, which again shows the proposed layout of the development as well as the proposed landscaping surrounding the site. In terms of the proposal, to conclude, it would be an obvious feature in the landscape. It would introduce a man-made feature into the existing arable field, and the properties adjacent to the site and a small number of dwellings within roughly 1 kilometre to the north of the site and around 600 metres to the south of the site would be aware of the presence of the proposal. However, the landscape and visual impacts would generally be most significant in limited and localised areas, and mitigation measures have been included as part of the development, which help reduce the significance of those impacts over time. There is no evidence to suggest that the development would significantly affect protected species, important habitats, or the wider biodiversity interests in the area or built heritage features. The proposal would have some limited adverse impacts on the amenity of occupants of the closest dwellings, and there would result in increased traffic during the construction period. However, the relationship between the proposed development and the surrounding dwellings and roads would not be...
I'll just interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
We are reaching 3 hours of this meeting. I would propose and move that we suspend standing orders to allow us to continue to 1:30 with this part of the meeting, and also propose that if we are not finished the meeting by 1:30, Communities is coming here for 2 o'clock, and to allow us all a break, that we would then reconvene immediately after Communities, or hopefully about 3 o'clock, if not about 3:30. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Sorry.
Just advise as well that I noticed members had a briefing scheduled on Tay City's deal, which I've asked colleagues to postpone to a later date to allow all members here to attend.
Councillor Dorn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so just to note that I wouldn't be able to attend after Communities this afternoon.
Okay, Councillor Stewart. Sorry, Councillor Stewart.
Likewise, convener.
Okay. Okay, so in regards for the moment, I'm moving, we're suspending standing orders, and we'll till 1:30, and at that time we'll decide if we're moving forward with this or not. Okay, thank you. Sorry, carry on, Steph, to finish.
No, it's okay. I'm nearly finished, I promise. So as I was just saying, however, the relationship between the solar development and the surrounding dwellings and roads would not be unusual or untypical of that found in relation to similar developments, and impacts could be regulated by condition. Policies generally recognise that some adverse impacts may be expected, but the key test is whether those impacts are so significant as to be unacceptable. All adverse impacts must be balanced against the desirability of facilitating the development that would provide a significant contribution towards renewable energy generation, which in this case, as alluded to earlier, the proposal would generate the energy equivalent to the annual energy usage of around 6,800 homes each year, and this would contribute to addressing the climate crisis. So there's no objection from statutory consultees, and the single letter of objection hasn't raised any material issues which would warrant refusal of the proposal, which is otherwise compatible with relevant policies and guidance, and therefore the proposal is recommended approval subject to the conditions listed in the report before members.
Councillor Nicholl, can you mute your microphone?
Councillor Stewart,
Okay.
I've done
Is
it.
it? Oh, Councillor.
That's no me.
All right, so mute anyway. Thanks, Steph. Can I just ask, again, thank you for the very thorough presentation. Can I ask if any members have any questions of Ms Porter? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Stephanie, and very well done. These are just, just simple, well, I think they're simple, generic questions, but and they're almost rhetorical in some respects. But when we mention the condition to restore the site, would there be a bond in that? That's what I would be used to. That's fine, that's great. I do read that this application is outside the ALDP. Am I right?
In terms of it's out with a development boundary in the countryside, yeah. No. Yeah, no, SEPA have got no objection, but they have made reference. They make reference to standing advice in relation to flood risk. Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms Porter? Oh, I'm sorry, Heather. Councillor Doran, go ahead.
Thank you. My question relates to the access path through the woodland, and are any change in order to allow the vehicle access? Are any changes going to be needed to make to that path, because that goes through the woodland? So that is my kind of biggest concern in terms of biodiversity, and I know that there's not been a full surveys done around it, like impact, which I think is expected with an application such as this. But because that path goes through the woodland, my concern is that there'd be big disruption there. Thank you.
That's a reasonable question. I actually did include a slide which show it was a visualisation of the access. It doesn't look like it from these images, but it is an existing field access, and it is a relatively large clearing at the moment. So there's reasonable space within that existing access channel through the woodland to accommodate the access track.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. In that case, we have the applicant here, Pippa Robertson. If you'd like to take a seat for a second. Do you wish to address the committee, or are you just waiting for questions?
I'll speak very quickly.
Okay.
The time.
Okay. Just introduce yourself, and I say you've got 5 minutes regardless.
Help with that. Hi, hopefully you can hear me now. I'm Pippa from Aurora Planning. I'm here with the Senior Planning Manager from Green Tech, the applicant, just to provide a little more information about some of the benefits and then to answer any questions. In particular, I would like to re-emphasise the strong policy support for renewable development, energy generating developments in principle. That's been highlighted just now, what policies 1 and 11 say about needing to give significant weight to the contribution that this type of development makes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to meeting targets for increasing renewable energy generation. It's also worth noting that the Scottish Government's draft energy strategy includes a commitment to substantially increasing Scotland's renewable energy generating capacity, and that specifically includes a commitment to increasing the contribution that solar energy makes to that mix. So what contribution does this put? The figure of the number of homes that this could power has been highlighted. and the significant contribution that makes. I'd also highlight that there's a question raised about biodiversity. There's a biodiversity net gain report that's been submitted as part of the application, which highlights the significant enhancements to biodiversity of the site as a whole that will be delivered as part of this, and at the same time it also significantly contribute to the viability of the farming enterprise of which the field forms part, in which this is one of the least productive fields in that farm holding, and the project's been designed to allow that field to continue to be used for grazing sheep, which is what it would be used for otherwise, while also generating the renewable energy from the solar panels. Of course, the contribution that the development makes in this respect isn't the only consideration. It is, of course, very necessary to consider any potential impacts, but I think it's been made very clear that the proposed siting and design is in accordance with the Council's guidance, and that this development wouldn't give rise to any impacts that can't either be addressed by condition or which would otherwise justify the application being refused. So, given the benefits that the development would deliver, the contribution this would make to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to meeting renewable energy generating targets, and the absence of any impacts that would justify this being refused, there really isn't much more for me to say, other than to ask you to approve it in accordance with the recommendation. And if you do have any questions, then between us, we're very happy to answer them.
Thanks very much indeed. Do the committee members have any questions to wish to address the applicant or the agent? Don't see any hands. No, you're free. Thanks, free to go. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we'll move straight. Again, the proposed development provides a source of renewable energy and generation in a manner that would not give rise to unacceptable impacts on infrastructure, amenity, landscape or other environmental interests subject to the appropriate mitigation suggested. That mitigation can be secured by planning conditions, and the proposal complies with development plan policy subject to the stated planning conditions in section 10 of the report. As such, quite simply, I'm going to move approval subject to the proposed conditions. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Duff. Thank you. Any amendment? No. Great stuff. Thank you. In that case, planning application 23/00424 of the FULM is hereby approved. Thank you. Right. It's 1:10. We have said that we would continue to 1:30. Can I just mention this now? At 1:30, we will close. Or we'll adjourn, and I'm suggesting that we come back at 3:30 to just allow ourselves community's time, just in case it does slightly overrun what we might think. I know that certain members are not going to be able to attend, but we would still be quorum. Are we happy to agree that? I could go to a vote, but if we're happy to agree that? Yeah? Okay, we'll go with that. At this point, thank you. At this point, proceedings, I'll vacate the chair in favour of the Deputy Convener, due to me having declared an interest in the next agenda item.
Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 8, relates to the report 38/24, planning application number 2300818, full for the change of use from a vacant retail unit to hot food pizza takeaway, including alterations to the building frontage, installation of oven, extract, ventilation and wall-mounted compressors at 1A High Street, Carnoustie. Do I have Mr. Porter to present slides for us, please?
Thank you, Vice Convener. So, as suggested, this is a planning application for the change of use of a retail unit to a hot food takeaway on the High Street in Carnoustie. And my slides don't work again. 2 seconds. Here we go. So, again, this slide here, it shows the application site outlined in red. It's an end unit of a single storey parade of 4 commercial units. It faces onto High Street in the north here, and it's got Station Road located to the east here. Also note that there's an existing large convenience store located to the southwest. And this square section here actually relates to a delivery yard to the rear, serving these 4 commercial units that's here. The application site measures around 103 square metres, and as I said, it's a single storey property. This slide here, again, it's an extract from the proposals map from the Angus Local Development Plan. The application site is located on the right-hand side of this image just here, so it is within the red line boundary which indicates the Carnoustie town centre. But as you'll see, it's out with the core retail area, which is indicated by these purple lines here. Both local and national policies seek to ensure that town centres are vibrant and vital places, and they're seen as a national asset in that respect. The Scottish Government recognises that the function of town centres is evolving, and it's no longer a purely retail zone. It's now also commonly accommodates financial and professional services. So local and national policies promote a town centre first approach for proposals of that nature, which generate significant footfall. Policies seek to enhance and improve the vitality and viability of centres and lend support to proposals for uses that are in keeping with the character and function of the area. There have been 3 letters of representation submitted to this proposal, as well as a petition including around 100 signatures. And the main concern, one of the main concerns shared in these submissions relates to the over-provision of hot food takeaways and changing the character of the area and late night noise and nuisance issues. However, you'll see from the report before you that a relatively small number of properties in the town centre are given over to hot food takeaway uses, and there's no reason to consider that one additional unit in this location would change the mixed-use character of the area, provide an unacceptable concentration of such uses, or undermine the predominant feel of the town centre from that of a retail and service centre. In terms of activity, even a moderately successful business will generate activity. However, the Carnoustie town centre is an area that's typical of higher levels of activity than, say, a predominantly residential area, and some of the activity is expected to take place beyond usual office hours. The applicant has indicated that the intended opening hours for the business would be between 11 AM and 11 PM, and again, that's not uncommon for hot food takeaways in Angus. It's also worth noting that if they were to open beyond 11 PM, that would be regulated by the late hours catering licence. So town centres are typically mixed-use areas where they facilitate the nighttime economy, and there's no reason to consider that a new takeaway use in this location would be unacceptable in that regard. This slide here just shows you some images of the application property. This is the principal elevation of the property on this bottom right-hand image here. This fronts onto High Street to the north of the property, and as you can see, it's got a relatively modern store frontage. This is the application property located in this region here, where the side elevation fronts onto Station Road, and this bottom image here is looking from High Street down Station Road, where you can see the application property on the right hand side. So as I said, it is a vacant property. It's a single storey unit that doesn't directly abut any residential properties. The nearest residential property is located on the opposite side of High Street in this region here. The property is directly opposite on Station Road is a commercial unit on the ground floor, and it is understood to be a social club, I think, on the upper floor here. As you'll notice, there is also CCTV units directly in front of the application property, and a number of public litter bins on either side of High Street. So the letters of representation raised concerns with regards to impacts upon other similar hot food takeaway businesses in the area. However, I would stress it's not the purpose of the planning system to regulate competition between businesses or to favour the identity of one applicant over another. Neither of those matters are material planning considerations and cannot be taken into account in the determination of this proposal. The assessment must be based on compatibility with relevant planning policies and material considerations. In policy terms, the principle of reusing this vacant unit in this location within the town centre for a hot food takeaway is generally supported, and beyond that, the key considerations relate to impact upon amenity of other properties. And as I suggested earlier, there is a reasonable separation distance from the application property to nearest residential properties, and our colleagues in environmental health have assessed the proposal in terms of noise and smell impacts and have not raised any objection subject to the proposed conditions, which require a ventilation and odour abatement scheme to be agreed and installed, and noise limits to limit the noise from fixed plant. This slide here shows the proposed alterations to the fabric of the building. As you'll see from the previous slide, it does currently have a modern frontage. The proposal would just have slight amendments to that. I would highlight that there are adverts illustrated on these images, however, that be most appropriately regulated through the associated advert consent. The other external alterations to the building relate to these two flues on the roof of the building and this air conditioning unit to the rear of the property. As you'll see from the floor plan on the left-hand side, the air conditioning unit to the rear is located in this location and is surrounded by an existing enclosed bin storage area, and I'll show you that in the next slide as well. Internal alterations to the building, there would be the counter area to the front here, with a food prep area beyond that, and staff facilities and storage space to the rear. There is a small counter space here, which is unlikely to serve a kind of eating in function. It's more to serve for customers picking up deliveries. So this slide here, it just shows you the rear of the property. As you can see, there's existing flues which serve one of the other commercial properties in the single-storey parade. The proposed vents in this instance would be located roughly in this region here, and the air conditioning unit, although it would be seen from Station Road, this is where this image is taken from, it would be partially screened by the existing bin store. The bin store would be utilised for waste of the proposal. And I would also highlight the existence of the service yard, which again would serve the application property and the existing properties along the parade. So onto the final slide here. Other concerns have been raised by third parties which relate to potential impacts on parking and road safety, as well as littering. The dropping of litter is possible, but it's out with the control of the proprietor. However, as you'll see, there are multiple bins in the area, as highlighted on one of the earlier slides. There's one in front of the application property here, where the application property is located at the end of this single-storey row here, but there are also bins further down High Street, one located here and another in the foreground here. In terms of parking, the planning system cannot control how people choose to park. Furthermore, relevant planning guidance doesn't require dedicated parking provision for hot food takeaways, and there is on-street and off-street parking provided in the area, again illustrated in this image with the on-street parking here. There are existing hot food takeaways in the vicinity, and they would rely upon this parking areas too. However, this proposal is unique in the fact that it would have the service yard located at the rear to alleviate some of the parking issues. The road service has considered the proposal and has offered no objection. There's been no objection raised from any other statutory consultees, and there's no matters raised in the letters of representation or any other material considerations which would justify refusal of the proposal, which is otherwise compatible with policy. This is a relatively bling area which supports the nighttime economy, and the proposal would not significantly impact upon the character or the general appearance of this area. The application site is detached from residential properties, and it would not result in any unacceptable amenity impacts subject to the conditions listed in the report. The proposal would utilise a vacant building in the town centre and would help to maintain the viability and vibrancy of that area, and it relates to use which is considered appropriate in this location in terms of the policy position subject to the conditions. Therefore, the proposal is recommended for conditional approval as set out in the report.
Right. Thanks, Ms Porter. Is there any members have any questions for the officer? No? Any online have any questions? Hands up. Okay. Yeah, I know.
Mr Sturrock, to answer questions on behalf of the applicant.
Is Mr Sturrock online?
He's online.
Okay. Mr Sturrock, can you, are you going to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yeah, thanks. It's just to take any questions that the members may have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No. Okay. There's no questions for you, Mr Sturrock.
Thank you.
Okay. Do any of the members have any comments? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Beattie.
Just one comment. I notice from the images that there are lots of double yellows all around, and you explained about parking, and they've got a bit of the park and all the rest of it. But you know, in my experience, personal experience, double yellows are ignored outside these buildings, and that's a very narrow road.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. Okay. We will sum up now. So to sum up, the competition between the businesses is not a material planning consideration, and similarly, it is not appropriate for the planning system to favour one individual over another. Some comment is made regarding impacts on the amenity of the area and its residents. The key question in relation to the determination of this application is whether this is an acceptable location for this type of use, and whether adverse impacts can be adequately mitigated. Issues regarding traffic congestion, access and parking have been considered and addressed in the report. Council policy guidance does not require dedicated parking position for hot food takeaways, and there is on and off street parking in the area. In addition, the road service has offered no objections. The proposal is compliant with the development plan policy subject to the proposed planning conditions in section 10 of this report, which seeks to mitigate impacts that may arise from the proposed use. As such, I'm going to move to approve this application and subject to the stated conditions. Would anyone like to care to second the motion? Okay, thank you. It was Kenny. Yes, and Councillor Clark.
Yeah.
Are there any amendments? Okay. Well, that then concludes that planning application number 23/00818 full is hereby approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Can we ask David? Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Convener. Okay, agenda item 9, what's the time? Maybe get this one in, which is a proposal application notice for, submitted on behalf of Vital Energy Limited for a major development involving a battery energy storage system up to 49.9 megawatts on and associated infrastructure on the site of the former gasworks in Carsview Road, Forfar. Committee is invited to identify issues which we would like to see addressed in any planning application that is subsequently submitted. Do we want to see any slides at all on this?
I've got slides if you want to.
Just even in a couple of initial ones.
So this slide. Sorry, microphone. So this slide here.
It's not coming through, Steph.
Oh, on that. Right, I'm mindful of the time, so I'll try this one. There's not really too much to say. There's limited information that's been submitted as part of this proposal because it's a proposal of application notice, which is simply an intimation that the applicant intends to submit a planning application for a major development at a later date. So the application site is roughly 0.36 hectares and it's located in this region here, illustrated by the red line site, sandwiched between the Forfar Athletic Football Club and a Cityside Industrial Estate. Move on to the next slide. Again, this is an extract of the Forfar proposal map from the ALDP. The application site is an unallocated site which is located within the Forfar development boundary in this region here, where the green space illustrates the football ground, and the purple hatched line here is existing employment land. This just gives you a context of the site on the ground. The site is illustrated by this red flag here. As you can see, it has previously developed site, it has regenerated to a degree, and the nearest residential properties are located on the opposite side of the football ground here, and the opposite side of the industrial estate down here. This slide here just shows a street view image of the site. The site is the area encased by the green fencing. And as convener suggested, the officers have identified key considerations in relation to the determination of a planning application in section 4.4 of the report. And as you'll note, it does include the potential for fire risk. But if members wish to identify any additional issues that they would like to see considered addressed as part of any subsequent planning application, they're invited to do so.
Thanks, Steph. Do members have any questions on this one, or do they wish to add any considerations that are not already in paragraph 4.4? Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, this development is potentially taking place just south of another battery storage area, which we've already approved. Included in that was a battery management plan. I'd like to see a battery management plan included in this one, because, I mean, fire risk is covered, but it's where water goes after the fire that concerns me.
Just to clarify, is that to cover the fire safety aspects? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, are there any other additional considerations that members would like added to this? No? In that case, the report requests elected members note the key issues in addition to what Councillor Beattie has suggested in the paragraph. Is that duly noted? Great, thank you very much. Sorry, in that case we'll adjourn the meeting now and reconvene at 3:30, I'm suggesting, after communities, and we only have 2 more agenda items. I think we'll move them quite quickly. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you for just now.
Can we stop the live stream, please?